Chapter 2038. At this moment, Han Fei was like a demon, holding two pieces of wreckage in his hands. Even though he was surrounded by a pack of wolves, he wasn't afraid at all. Not because of the existence of his mother-in-law, Xia Hongzhu, nor because of the existence of his ally, the Sword God, but because this place was very close to the Imperial Palace. Because as long as he willed it, he could flatten this place with one hand. Because of his extreme speed, he could ignore the pursuit of these heaven-opening state experts. Therefore, Han Fei unscrupulously absorbed Pang Jia's vitality. The nautical manifestation appeared in Han Fei's hand, and the 5 rings inside and outside were rotating. When the pointer was fixed, Han Fei reached out and pointed in the void, and the void knowed they're shattered. Han Fei cast the Gemini Divine Technique and walked in front of the emperors. With the strength of a heaven-opening state expert, his aura had weakened a lot, so they would definitely notice that he had gone in. But so what? Han Fei said, "You want to leave the chaotic azure sea, don't you?" He Dao Yuan, Bei Luochen, is this what you want? Well, maybe not, because you don't have the guts to go out. Look, this is Pang Jia's origin sea. Sure, Pahuang, I seized his origin sea in front of you. Are you very angry? Do you want to come up and bite me? Han Fei smiled coldly. Since you're all here, you don't have to hide anymore. My Yin-Yang Heaven and your Grand Pure Wuji have a deep grudge. You've plotted against me several times. Now, I'm standing here. Do you still want to plot against me? Humph. Bei Luochun snorted coldly. Han Fei, is arrogance the reason why you're so proud? Do you think you can use it to cooperate with the mermaids? Is it reasonable to betray the human race? F*CKU. Han Fei pointed at Bei Luochun. You keep saying that the human race is the human race, but you haven't done a damn thing for the human race. In Yin-Yang Heaven, I'm also respected by tens of thousands of people. You rotten old man, other than living a long life in vain and only thinking about eradicating dissidents, what else do you know? How dare you? Han Fei followed Bei Luochun and shouted, "What? Come and hit me. You think I don't dare?" Bei Luochun attacked angrily. The black moon floated in the air, and the blood leech opened its eyes. It let go of its hand and slashed across the void for millions of miles. With scarlet blood and the pressure of an emperor, it slashed toward Han Fei. Han Fei smiled. Tai Yuan was the first to shake his head speechlessly, thinking that Bei Luochun must have been exasperated. Han Fei was clearly trying to establish his might. He wanted to forcibly become one of the peak powers of the chaotic Azure Sea. At the same time, he wanted to let all the Sea Expansion Kings know just how terrifying he was. There was a purpose to this, but he was not sure what it was. However, Bei Luochun had obviously fallen for it. He had wanted Bei Luochun to attack him. However, under such circumstances, even if Bei Luochun were to make a move, he couldn't really attack Han Fei. He could only attack from a distance, try to suppress Han Fei with his strength, and teach him a lesson. However, how could Han Fei's current strength be underestimated? Tearing apart Pang Jia with his bare hands, this power could no longer be measured with the power of the Sea Expansion Realm. This was clearly the power of the Heaven-Opening Realm. Therefore, when Bei Luochun attacked, Han Fei countered with an immortal-killing aura. The immortal spiritual qi and the ferocious qi intertwined, and Han Fei was not weak in the first place. Although Bei Luochun's attack was also fierce, it couldn't forcibly wipe out the immortal-killing aura. Rumble hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, the two collided, the void collapsed, and billions of seawater were sucked into the endless void. In addition to the explosion of power, there was still a part of the immortal-killing aura, which actually shattered Bei Luochun's attack and continued to fly towards him. Although there was not much of this power left, maybe not even 1/10 of it. However, this was a manifestation of strength, a powerful oath, and a form of intimidation. Sure enough, hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, countless beast kings gasped. Toad, who had just come out of the Imperial Palace, was shocked. That Han Fei has become so strong. It's only been 3 years, and he has the power comparable to the Heaven-Opening Realm. A giant beast, Seashell, pulled it and scolded, "Don't get too close. This is the Heaven-Opening Realm, and he likes to use our bodies as materials. Why are you so close? Do you want to die? Xia Jiming watched the battle from afar, but she was also stunned by the power Han Fei had displayed. He had torn apart Pang Jia with his bare hands and pierced through Bei Luoqin's attack. This person, was there any way for her to take revenge? Old Lady Qiu's heart was trembling at this moment. How long has it been? Han Fei, who was cautious and had to run away at the slightest sign of trouble. How many years has it been? Now he dares to challenge the beast kings of the chaotic vast sea? Hong Yu, who was lucky enough to survive, swallowed from time to time as he watched this scene. He told himself, if Han Fei doesn't die today, no one in the chaotic vast sea can kill him anymore. When I go back, the first thing I have to do is to collect the 10 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones that Han Fei wants. This is a life-saving money. I have to give it to him. Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Han Fei sneered. Bei Luoqin, you're old. Whether you are a heaven-opening realm or not, you are old after all. Do you really think I care about the old grudges? No, it's just that you are too aggressive. Now, I haven't opened the sky yet, so I can't do anything to you. But when do you have a way to deal with me? Wait, when I grow up, I will find you one by one, unless you leave the chaotic vast sea. At this moment, He Dao Yuan said leisurely, young man, sometimes don't be too arrogant. You may be able to escape today, but it doesn't mean that you can escape for long. Escape? Han Fei sneered. He Dao Yuan, don't think too highly of yourself. Today, I dare to stay here because I'm confident that I can leave. You've missed too many opportunities to kill me. Now, you won't have another chance. Today, I'm just telling you one thing. Wash your neck and wait for me to kill you. How dare you? Bei Luoqin snorted. If it weren't for the complicated structure of the people here, he would have taken action. He Dao Yuan was also disdainful. Young man, it's windy here. Don't bite your tongue. Xia Hongzhu couldn't help but touch the trident in her hand. Her sole perception, just now, was synchronized with the mark on Xia Xiaochan's body. She saw the scene where Han Fei attacked the powerhouse of the Ascendant God's heaven. She even saw some of the private behaviors between the two of them. At least for now, on the surface, Han Fei didn't seem too bad. The only thing that didn't make her feel good was that Xia Xiaochan and Han Fei were too intimate, much more intimate than she was with her. Just like her, she was also somewhat unable to extricate herself from love. At this time, because of the return of the sixth vine in the demon purification pot, the absorption speed was faster. There were as many as 10,500 wisps of chaotic energy in Pang Jia's origin sea, which were all absorbed by him. In addition, Han Fei found a lot of resources in Pang Jia's origin sea. If measured in terms of spiritual stones, the number would probably exceed 5 billion. Among them, there was a bronze jade shield technique, which should have been obtained by Pang Jia in the Imperial Palace, and now belonged to him. The reason why Han Fei was chatting with Bei Luoqin and the others here was naturally for Pang Jia's resources. Of course, he had another deeper purpose. That was to frighten the 36 Xiantian heavens and demand control of the 13 outer heavens. However, Han Fei wouldn't take this control right away. He hadn't opened the sky yet. If he insisted on taking this control, Bei Luoqin and the others would probably be more than happy to give it to him. At that time, the 100 demons and the underwater humans would take action themselves, and they would play tricks on them. How could the 13 outer heavens resist them? How could he have time to practice opening the sky? Therefore, Han Fei killed Pang Jia openly today just to frighten the 36 Xiantian heavens and to take control of the 13 outer heavens at a specific time in the future. Now that his purpose had basically been achieved, Han Fei knew that it was time for him to go. Han Fei leaped with a golden light and came to Xia Xiaochan and the others. Putting away his body, the phantoms of mountains and rivers appeared around Han Fei, and he said lightly, "Since no one wants me to stay, I'm leaving." He Dao Yuan looked at Xia Hongzhu and said lightly, "Believe me, the appearance of the War Queen won't protect you for long." Ha ha, Han Fei laughed. I, Han Fei, have been through many life-and-death situations in my life. When have I ever needed someone to protect me? Han Fei leaped with a golden light and appeared 600,000 kilometers away. His running speed was unparalleled in the world. In the void, Han Fei's voice was left behind, echoing for millions of kilometers. I, Han Fei, call myself the Human King. In a few days, I will first slaughter the Grampier One, then kill the Wuji race, then suppress the 100 demons, and kill Kong Shun. The future is long, and all the emperors will stretch their necks to wait for me to appear again. Chapter 2039. This time, a total of 13 people from the Yin-Yang Heaven came back from the trip to the Imperial Palace. The loss rate was as high as 60%, which was what Han Fei had told them. However, Han Fei could only focus on some of them, and the rest depended on their own luck. And now, among the 13 people, 8 of them were confident in passing the tribulation, and they were all outstanding figures from the Yin-Yang Heaven. The Imperial Palace itself didn't have the conditions to become a king, so they had to pass the tribulation after coming out of the Imperial Palace. Even if they entered the Imperial Palace and became a king, they didn't do it in the Imperial Palace. They did it after leaving the Imperial Palace. Only the 3rd day after leaving the Underground Palace, Jiao Mengyue, the Demon Beast Alliance, couldn't suppress her aura anymore and began to pass the tribulation outside the Yin-Yang Heaven. On this day, the venerables of the Yin-Yang Heaven were watching. Who didn't want to pass the tribulation and become a king? However, to everyone's surprise, Jiao Mengyue turned into a dragon in the midst of the tribulation. Horns grew out of her head, and limbs grew out of her body. She broke through the 9 realm tribulations and became a king. Seeing this scene, Old Sheep sighed. This is the great world. This is not the great world yet. Han Fei appeared next to Old Sheep. This guy had already passed the tribulation and became a pseudo-king, so he couldn't pass the tribulation again in his life. However, Han Fei knew that Old Sheep was already cultivating an incarnation. It seemed that Old Sheep didn't want to die like this. It thought that the great world had just arrived and the cage had just been broken. How could it be willing to grow old? Only one day after Jiao Mengyue passed the tribulation, the Insect King chose another place to pass the tribulation. It was wearing a bright red insect armor and holding the horns of the heavenly bull. Another 7 days later, Ziluo passed the tribulation and the first king appeared in the Forest of Terror. On the same day, Han Fei accompanied Ren Tianfei to pass the tribulation. A month later, Luo Xiaobai passed the tribulation and became a king. 3 months later, Lu Renquang passed the tribulation successfully. 8 months later, at this moment, in the mist sea, lightning was shining and purple qi was roaring. Zhang Xuanyu had gone through 5 tribulations and became one with the golden bone. At this moment, the 9th purple lightning rumbled down. Zhang Xuanyu's divine soul cracked, and the energy of the spirit fruit under his feet surged up. In the vast thunder, Zhang Xuanyu murmured in a voice that only he could hear, "And nobody can open the heavenly gate. Dazzling heavenly Tao, only I wield the spear. Only this Tao can break through the obstacles in front of me, break through the barriers of all worlds, kill." No one knew who Zhang Xuanyu was, but Han Fei saw it clearly. A knocking sound came from the sky. It was not the void, but the great path. Clang, dang, clang, the heavenly tribulation dissipated, and a golden jade divine spear appeared in front of Zhang Xuanyu. The cracks on Zhang Xuanyu's body had already disappeared. Zhang Xuanyu suddenly opened his eyes. From today onwards, if the spear exists, the man lives. If the spear breaks, the man dies. My Tao is only me, Lu Renquang exclaimed. Where'd he get that gun? Han Fei said solemnly, that's not a gun, but his life. The rise of the Yin-Yang Heaven was already unstoppable. Now there were a total of 13 kings, which had surpassed most of the forces in the 36 Xiantian heavens. However, because they had just entered the sea expansion realm, they couldn't be compared with Old Wang, who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Even Ren Tianfei, who had become a king, was only equivalent to the top 20 on the sea expansion list. This kind of growth speed was already extremely terrifying because Ren Tianfei used to be a king. Because they were all new kings, Han Fei ordered everyone to rest and build up their strength. Including himself, he had to slowly digest what he got from the imperial palace. 30 years later, In the Origin Sea, Han Fei was guiding the essence of the Earth veins to form the entire Origin Sea into a main meridian. The size of the Origin Sea had already reached 100,000 kilometers long ago. Otherwise, Han Fei's strength wouldn't have soared so much. Even the space couldn't bear his full blow. The past 30 years were actually almost 2,000 years for Han Fei. Even if half of the time was excluded, it was still equivalent to more than 1,000 years. After so many years, Han Fei had his own experience, which was that the way he set up the Origin Sea would affect his strength. Beside Han Fei was Old Yuan, who looked like Gue Sanqing. At this moment, the two of them were discussing the layout of the earth veins. The old turtle said, "After you open the sky, heaven and earth will be integrated, and the great Tao will be precipitated. The Origin Sea will continuously produce much more Tao than the Sea Expansion Realm. The Origin Sea even has the ability to transform spiritual energy into chaotic energy spontaneously. And the layout of the Origin Sea can make all the resources in the Origin Sea gradually melt into the Origin Sea and become a part of this world. At that time, the spiritual energy in this world can even be born and disappear on its own, mutually conserved and never exhausted." Han Fei was surprised. Can the spiritual energy in the Origin Sea never dry up? The old turtle said, "Not yet. Since we're going to fight, we'll have to consume the spiritual energy. However, it is said that the limit of the Origin Sea, the beginning of the longevity realm, can achieve this situation of never drying up." Han Fei sneered. "Nonsense. You didn't see it that time. Chu Hao was exhausted, and I even suspect that his Origin Sea was destroyed. As long as the Origin Sea belongs to the same body as you, it will be a relationship of prosperity and destruction. Resources and energy are fixed. As long as they are consumed, they will eventually be used up." The old turtle said, "Recycling is enough. In the battle of the Origin Sea, no one will worry about resources and energy. Because they have accumulated enough resources, there are a large number of reserves in the Origin Sea, which can be used at any time with a thought." In Han Fei's original coastal area, an underground river was being developed following Han Fei's gaze. Han Fei really opened up the earth veins everywhere and built a huge network of earth veins. Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, "Old Yuan, my Origin Sea has been developed to 100,000 kilometers. If it continues to expand at this rate, how many resources will I need?" The old tortoise said, "You finally asked this question." "Huh?" Han Fei was speechless. "Do you have to wait for me to ask before you tell me?" The old turtle said, "Because there is no need to know for the time being. It will only add to your troubles. But since you asked, I can explain it to you. Because the Origin Sea needs to be constantly expanded, the heaven-opening realm masters and even the emperors will expand the wilderness, explore the chaos, search for planets with life, and plunder resources to enrich the Origin Sea. You know, it is not easy to grow in any realm. Explore the chaos, search the wilderness, and if you encounter a primitive land or something, it is very easy to die." Han Fei asked, "Wait, what wilderness? What chaos? What primitive land?" The old turtle said, "Well, it's some new worlds outside the sea realm. We can explore from the chaos. However, every time such a place is opened up, all kinds of competitions and killings are inevitable. So in the past, there were still gods rising. But as it becomes more and more difficult to open up new primitive lands, it becomes more and more difficult to become gods." Han Fei couldn't help but have a lot of fanciful thoughts. So, after the sky was opened and the heaven and the earth merged, the Origin Sea needed to be expanded, and everyone had to fight for more resources. If this was the case, the so-called Sea Realm should be very poor in resources, right? The old turtle said, "This is still far from you. You'd better open the sky first. You don't have many resources now. Is it time to go out and search for resources?" Han Fei nodded slightly. For 1,000 years, 90% of his resources had been contributed to the Origin Sea. Just for this, he specially went to the wild corpse heaven, but he didn't expect that Hongyu had already prepared the resources he needed. In this way, he didn't have to take the initiative to plunder. However, Even if Hong Yu provided another 10 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones, it was only enough for Han Fei to make arrangements in the 90,000 kilometers of the Origin Sea. Of course, Han Fei didn't forget the share that the demon purification pot needed. However, after the demon purification pot swallowed about 5 billion or so, it stopped swallowing. Han Fei fed it with the chaotic qi again, but it still didn't eat. However, Han Fei found that the power of the great path generated in his origin sea was slowly swallowed by the demon purification pot. The fourth divine pill was between maturity and immaturity. But Han Fei was not too anxious. He hadn't opened the sky yet, and there were still many people to fight in the chaotic sea. When everything calmed down, only God knew when he would be in charge of this world. Han Fei couldn't help but glance at his information. Owner, Han Fei, level greater than 99, C expansion, C family tree, 840006, chaotic chi greater than 110,568 strands, spiritual power, 1001516, perception range, 1 million kilometers, power greater than 490,468 waves, first spiritual heritage, primordial vein. Second spiritual heritage, vein of eternal darkness, first spiritual beast, twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level 90, second spiritual beast, emperor sparrow, level 92, main art, time fishing, level 8 of void fishing, emperor level, divine. Quality, looking at this information, Han Fei was calm. This was almost his limit, because Han Fei found that it had become extremely difficult to improve his strength now. If it weren't for the void body refinement art, Han Fei felt that the limit of his strength growth in the sea expansion stage was about 430,000 waves with the pure mystic body. But now his strength had reached 490,000 waves, mainly due to the limitation of his physique. His physique was already too strong to the point that it began to limit his growth. However, because of the continuous growth of his physique, his golden bones had begun to change qualitatively. The golden bones began to change into the color of golden jade. The texture was like jade, the bones were golden, and the bones were no longer turbid but as smooth as jade. However, this transformation had only been carried out by about 30%. Han Fei suspected that this was also one of the factors that limited his growth. This was a body refinement direction that even he hadn't figured out yet. Chapter 2040. 1,000 years had passed in the Origin Sea, but only 30 years had passed in the outside world. Holding a green gourd in his hand, Han Fei raised his head and drank a mouthful of wine from time to time. Han Fei had started drinking the 1,000-year Tao-seeking wine as soon as he left the imperial palace, but it was finished in less than 50 years. 2,000 years had passed, and he had saved up a pile of it, which should be enough for 100 years. The Tao-seeking wine was indeed outstanding in its own way. When Han Fei first practiced the void body refinement art and the void sky observation technique, he couldn't get the hang of it for 10 years. He drank this wine every day until his head felt dizzy. As soon as his head felt dizzy, inspirations came one after another, and he gradually entered a good state. But it couldn't really help him understand the Tao. It should be very useful for those below the sea expansion stage. For himself, because at his level, he had already comprehended almost everything he needed to comprehend. He couldn't just comprehend blindly all day long, right? Thousand Star City, Central Holy City. When Han Fei arrived, there were already a lot of people living here. However, the living conditions of the Central Holy City were extremely harsh. Those who could come in were all venerables, which led to not many people coming in. Even after 30 years, the total number of venerables from the Yin-Yang Heaven, the Waterwood Heaven, and the Demon Beast Alliance had only 621 people. And this was because they had just come out of the original small world and come into contact with the new environment of the chaotic Azure Sea, which had so many resources. Therefore, the number of venerables had increased very fast. Because of the depression in small world, it was normal for them to grow faster after all the pressure was released. Han Fei's arrival didn't attract too much attention. Only Ren Tianfen and the other kings noticed him. Ren Tianfen grumbled, "You didn't come here after your immortal palace became a ruin. I invited Luo Xiaobai to come over and fix your immortal palace." Swish, Han Fei stepped into the palace and grabbed a spiritual fruit on the table. Chomp, Han Fei took a casual bite and said indifferently, "It's not dangerous up there. Why don't you fix it?" Ren Tianfen snorted. "I'm a man. How can I do that?" Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Then who's going to fix your origin sea for you? Do you need someone else to help you?" Ren Tianfei shrugged. "Why do you care? What? You came out after 30 years of seclusion? Yin-Yang Heaven and Waterwood Heaven have only been here for a short period of time. You can rest for another 100 years. The Yin-Yang Heaven shouldn't have been discovered in a mere 100 years." Han Fei shook his head. "My bones are already stiff. If I don't, I'll be crippled. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. I've already used up all my resources. I need to find more." Ren Tianfei was lost for words. "Didn't you bring back 10 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones 10 years ago?" Again, Han Fei said with a black face. "My origin sea has expanded to 100,000 kilometers. Do you think it's free?" Ren Tianfei nodded. "That's true. My guess is that the origin sea should be able to be developed using higher grade energy. Otherwise, it will naturally be more and more difficult to develop it with just top-grade spirit stones. I've tried. The chaotic energy can be expanded, but it consumes too much. Besides, the chaotic energy can maintain the overall quality of the origin sea, so it's best not to use it to expand the origin sea. After all, the environment in the chaotic ocean is too poor. It's suppressed by the Imperial Palace and can't go to the outside world. Otherwise, I can get some mysterious yellow stones, which are very effective in expanding the origin sea. Mysterious yellow stones. If the mysterious yellow gas in the dragon-subduing heaven can be condensed into crystals or semi-crystals, it can probably become mysterious yellow stones." Ren Tianfei nodded. "This thing is indeed rare in the chaotic ocean, and it doesn't seem to be very common in the Imperial Palace either." Han Fei thought to himself, "It's a pity that my million mysterious yellow stones were all swallowed by the demon purification pot. Otherwise, I could still use them now. Of course, a million might still be a little too few in terms of quantity. Anyway, because of the lack of resources, Han Fei couldn't even study the more powerful functions of the demon purification pot. Han Fei couldn't help but hold the 4 jade slips in his hand. When the jade slips were activated, only a few minutes later, blue flowers bloomed here, and Luo Xiaobai had arrived. Han Fei said in surprise, "You're here so soon?" Luo Xiaobai said, "My origin sea has been set up a long time ago. The seaborne prairie is very suitable for my cultivation, so there's no need to stay in the origin sea all the time." Zhang Xuanyu appeared with a swish and said with a smile, "It's mainly because our origin sea is too small and the resources are limited. The chaotic gas, ultra-quality spiritual stones, and mother loads didn't make much of a splash when we threw them into it. It's still misty." Then, Xia Xiaochan and Lu Renquang arrived one after another. Xia Xiaochan said, "Thanks to Xiaobai's discovery of a large ultra-quality mother lode, we dug about 8 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones in total. Otherwise, our growth would still be very slow." This was the first time that Han Fei had heard of an ultra-quality mother lode. Anyway, he hadn't encountered one. However, so many ultra-quality spiritual stones in the Azure Sea couldn't have fallen from the sky. He had never thought of mining before. Maybe he could try it in the future. Maybe it would be faster than robbing. Luo Xiaobai said, "In the seaborne prairie where we are, there are as many as 8,000 kinds of minerals buried underground. It's not surprising to find an ultra-quality mother lode. It's just that the concentration of spiritual energy around has been reduced by about 20% after we dug the mother lode." Han Fei shrugged and said, "So be it. Ordinary people only need to absorb spiritual energy from the void. However, I've run out of resources too. We can't just sit around and eat, or we'll lose everything." Immediately, Zhang Xuanyu and Lu Renquang's eyes lit up. "What do you mean? Which family are you going to attack?" Luo Xiaobai asked. "Do you already have a plan?" Xia Xiaochan asked. "How many people do you need?" Ren Tianfei was speechless as he listened on the side. If all the kings were as radical as these little bastards, the 36 mysterious heavens would have been doomed. But Ren Tianfei was curious too. You're strong now, but it's obviously not wise to attack the Grand Pure Wuji Palace. Luo Xiaobai nodded. The Grand Pure Palace is not far from the Wuji Palace. The three emperors are guarding it. Even if we can fight them, it will give the demons and the human beings at the bottom of the sea an opportunity. Even the royal mermaids can't be easily trusted. Luo Xiaobai looked at Xia Xiaochan. Xiaochan, it's hard to say. Maybe we'll be fine, but the entire human race might. The corner of Lu Renquang's mouth twitched. Do we have to be so radical? Han Fei grinned and said, no, we're not targeting the Grand Pure Palace or the Wuji Palace. Xia Xiaochan smiled. So, we're going to the investiture heaven? Zhang Xuanyu's eyes lit up. That's great. Those Be-Astras start chase Xia Xiaochan every day. It's time for them to pay the price. Luo Xiaobai asked, what about Huang Jinyuan? Didn't they say that he's very strong? And the investiture heaven and the god's arrival technique? It said that he's as strong as Emperor Li Qingdi. Han Fei smiled and said, Huang Jinyuan is strong, but we have allies. I still don't know much about the heaven opening state. I have to go to the Sword God Heaven. 7 days later, in the Sword God Palace, in the Sword Forging Pool. This was the place where the Sword God cultivated in seclusion. Ordinary people rarely came here. Han Fei had seen the Sword God before. At that time, he thought he was a king. His first impression was that although this person was cold, he looked gentle and didn't have the fierceness of a sword cultivator at all. Besides, at that time, the Sword God, Lu Li, Lu Yu, and the others seemed to be just peers, so he gave people the illusion that he was just a king. But now that he thought about it, perhaps the Sword God had already reached the point where he could restrain his sword aura. A million kilometers away from the Sword God Palace, Han Fei's perception reached this place. Outside the sword-casting pool, there were divine swords humming, as if welcoming Han Fei's arrival. The Sword God's voice sounded. Rare guest, please come in. With 2 streaks of golden light, Han Fei had already landed in the sword-casting pool. The place where the swords were forged was hidden in a canyon. It was said that the swords here were forged one by one. However, very few people were qualified to obtain swords. Outside the sword-casting pool, there were many swords stuck in the cliffs on both sides. Among these swords, there are no less than 20 sea-quelling bizarre treasures, and the strongest of them had already reached the level of an ultra-quality sea-quelling bizarre treasure. However, as soon as Han Fei came, the aura of a strong master attracted countless peerless swords, causing them to keep humming. Quiet. A loud voice reverberated in the canyon. Suddenly, all the swords fell silent. Han Fei took another step and appeared outside the real sword forging pool. There was a place covered in earthly flames and a strange formation set up here, which was the sword furnace. In the sword furnace, there was a black long sword, plain and unsharpened. It seemed that it hadn't been forged yet. However, although he couldn't feel the sword intent, Han Fei always wanted to reach out and try this sword. The Sword God walked out, his sleeves hanging casually, and said with a faint smile, "This sword has been forged for 3,333 years. I wanted to try to forge a sword beyond the level of a sea-quelling bizarre treasure, but unfortunately, I haven't met anyone worthy of my trust, so I haven't forged this sword for a long time." Han Fei raised his eyelids and said jokingly, "Senior, what do you think of me?" The Sword God said, "Nothing. This sword won't choose you until the path of swordsmanship is opened." Han Fei smiled. "That's a pity. I hope this sword can meet its lover and be born soon." The Sword God nodded slightly and invited Han Fei to the sword hut for a while. The two sat opposite each other, and the Sword God said, "You seem to be very vigorous and can't be suppressed. Have you touched the threshold of the heaven-opening realm?" Han Fei nodded slightly. "Yes, but don't worry." The Sword God said, "Young man, it's not easy for you to be able to fight steadily. I was right about you. There should only be one person in the entire chaotic vast sea who can come here in the Pioneer Sea realm." Han Fei was surprised. "Oh, you should know him. The Mermaid Royal Family, the War Queen. She is said to be the son of gods. She cultivates a divine body and is invincible in the Pioneer Sea realm. She once fought with the Human King. If the Human King walked the Tianqi Dao, she would have been defeated. Chapter 2041. My Mother-in-Law, the Sword God. This was the first time Han Fei had heard of this kind of history. He knew that the cultivation potential of a divine scion was extremely high, but he didn't expect his mother-in-law to be so strong. According to the Sword God, if his mother-in-law and he were in the same realm, he might not be able to beat her. But Han Fei didn't care. Who would know if he didn't fight her? Besides, their basic combat power might be equal, but his mother-in-law's great Dao might not be stronger than his. Since Han Fei was here, he didn't hide anything. He said, "I'm here for two things, and I may need Senior Sword God's help." The Sword God looked up at Han Fei. "Tell me about it." Han Fei smiled and said, "Senior, in this chaotic azure sea, I've basically offended all the heaven-opening realms. The human race and the mermaid royal family have different Daos, so I can only ask you about the heaven-opening realm powerhouse. I want to ask about the combat power standard of the heaven-opening realm and the experience of opening the sky." Han Fei had already asked the old turtle these two questions, but the old turtle was not a human, so the situation of opening the sky was somewhat different from his. According to the old turtle's experience, if all the great Daos kept up, the lowest power of a heaven-opening realm could reach at least 600,000 waves. However, after opening the sky, the great Dao would grow wildly, the origin sea would be fully used, and the combat efficiency would be higher. Both his physique and spiritual power would skyrocket, and his bloodline would also be improved. So, in summary, even the lowest level of the heaven-opening realm was ridiculously strong and not something a sea-opening realm powerhouse could resist. The Sword God shook his head slightly. A sword cultivator opening the sky is different from a normal person opening the sky. I'm afraid I can't answer your question. If you are a sword cultivator, you can learn some experience from here. But since you asked, I can tell you about the combat power after opening the sky. First of all, the heaven-opening realm is not as strong as you think. I guess your current pure power should be 400,000 waves, right? Han Fei's heart did a flip. It seemed that even the Sword God was wrong. However, then he heard the Sword God say, "Generally speaking, 400,000 waves seems to be the ceiling of the sea-opening realm. Even the peak strength of the grand primordial realm was only more than 350,000 waves. Although strength could not be used to measure strength, it could be used as a comparison. Li Qingdi's strength had reached more than 390,000 waves. He is currently the strongest one apart from the War Queen." Han Fei's heart stirred, and he could not help asking, "What about the martial emperors?" The Sword God shook his head slightly. "I have not fought with a martial emperor before, but I estimate that he should be on par with Emperor Li Qingdi, or even slightly stronger. Even if it exceeds 400,000 waves, it won't exceed by much." Han Fei frowned. The old turtle also said that his peak strength was 400,000. Was this a threshold? However, his current strength was already close to 500,000. Sword God continued, "That's the standard I know of for the peak of sea expansion. Of course, secret techniques don't count. Once you've reached sea expansion, using secret techniques will only exhaust your potential, unless they're at an extremely high level." The Sword God was probably trying to remind Han Fei. He had seen Han Fei's attack. When he killed Pang Jia, the power he displayed was so huge that the void collapsed, and he had to withdraw his power. It was precisely because of Han Fei's combat power that the emperors gave up the idea of starting a war. Otherwise, with the War Queen's protection, they might still try it. The Sword God smiled slightly. "The power you erupt with actually exceeds that of ordinary powerhouses who have just entered the heaven-opening state. Take Xian Xingzi as an example. Although this person is talented, I don't think he is very strong as an emperor because his foundation is weak. Therefore, I can conclude that if we calculate purely based on his current level of power, it will not exceed 800,000 waves." So low? Han Fei couldn't help exclaiming, "How could the heaven-opening state be so weak?" "Low?" The Sword God shook his head slightly. "Strength is not the main measure of the combat power of the heaven-opening state. Although Xian Xingzi's strength may not exceed 800,000 waves so far, if he really drives it with a great way, his combat power will be stronger than the peak state you showed before. Han Fei thought to himself, but it's not necessarily stronger than my current state, right? Han Fei asked, Senior, what was your original strength? The sword god didn't hide it and said casually, when I first entered, it was 920,000 waves. I'm telling you this just to let you have a basic judgment. According to my guess, the weakest heaven-opening state may at least have more than 600,000 waves when they first entered the heaven-opening state. No matter how low it is, it should be impossible. Perhaps in the outside world, there are many existences who have more than 1,000,000 waves when they first entered the heaven-opening state. But in the chaotic ocean, there are very few of them. Maybe you can count as one. But now, I advise you not to challenge the heaven-opening state before you reach the peak of the sea-opening state. Among the people you want to challenge, I'm afraid the only one you can fight is Xian Xingzi. Han Fei narrowed his eyes slightly. Senior, have you guessed why I'm here? The sword god smiled lightly. You should know that with He Daoyuan and Bei Luochun guarding the Grand Purity Palace and the Wuji Heaven, you have no chance. You can't catch Xian Xingzi. You won't fight the 100 demons and the seabed humans in advance. So the only one I can think of is Investiture of the God's Heaven. However, the time when you're going to attack Investiture of the God's Heaven is beyond my expectation. I didn't expect you to come out after only 30 years of seclusion. Han Fei thought to himself, 30 years is already a long time. I'm seriously short of resources now. If I don't go out and get some resources, God knows when I can reach the peak of the sea-opening state. Han Fei said, I want to try. The sword god looked at Han Fei. You should know the difference of Investiture of the God's Heaven, right? Han Fei nodded. The so-called God's Arrival is equivalent to a super-secret method, which can double your strength. Besides, Investiture of the God's Heaven has always been mysterious. I don't know if there are other strong masters there. This is a problem. The sword god nodded slightly. Yes, Huang Jingyuan may not be as strong as Emperor Li Qingdi, He Daoyuan, or me. But if he really breaks out, it is definitely not a problem for him to deal with them for a while, or even longer. If you want to attack Investiture of the God's Heaven now, you need to consider whether it is possible that you're walking into a trap. Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, unless there is a second heaven-opening state in Investiture of the God's Heaven. If there isn't, except for Huang Jingyuan, no one is a match for me. Even if there is a second heaven-opening state in Investiture of the God's Heaven, as long as his strength is only at Xian Xingzi's level, I am not afraid. Of course, the premise is that Senior is willing to help. If I help and conquer Investiture of the God's Heaven, I can share the resources with Senior. The sword god was a little surprised. Do you think you can beat Xian Xingzi now? Han Fei said deeply, Senior, if I am strong enough, can I crush Xian Xingzi? For example, the power of more than 2,000,000 waves. Huh? The sword god was stunned. He couldn't help but look sideways again. Such a strong power, even if it was his current limit, was at most to this extent. The sword god said, when a kind of power is strong to the extreme, it can naturally cause a situation of crushing. But even so, it is easy for you to beat him, but I am afraid it will not be easy to kill him. After all, the power of the Emperor, the Origin Sea, is endless. As long as the Origin Sea and the Great Tao are not obliterated, it is difficult for you to kill the Emperor. Han Fei narrowed his eyes. I see. However, Senior, please help me. I need the resources of Investiture of the God's Heaven. The sword god narrowed his eyes slightly. Even if I help, can you conquer Investiture of the God's Heaven? Although many kings of Investiture of the God's Heaven have died, there is no second heaven opening state. However, I can still offer a dozen kings. Besides, that is Huang Jingyuan's own territory. Han Fei said, I offer 25 kings. However, my purpose this time is not only to plunder the resources of Investiture of the God's Heaven. I also want to kill him. The sword god didn't expect Han Fei to have such a big appetite. It was not that no one had ever thought about killing an emperor, but since the appearance of an emperor in the chaotic ocean, no one had died so far. The sword god wondered, if you want to kill an emperor, do you know that you have to cut off its great Tao to have a chance? Han Fei nodded. I know. Since Han Fei was preparing to kill an emperor in only 30 years, he had naturally consulted the old turtle about some things. It was not impossible to kill an emperor. The extreme state of the infinity water could turn it into a Tao and kill the soul to cut off the Tao. But Han Fei hadn't tried it, so it should be difficult. However, he and the old turtle had also discussed a strategy, and they felt that it was feasible, so they were ready to take action. Besides, Han Fei wasn't unprepared this time. In the past 30 years, Han Fei had gone to the 10,000 poison heaven 7 times and concocted a great poison with Huang Jie. Although it couldn't kill an emperor, after repeated calculations, it could at least reduce the strength of a heaven opener by 30%. Of course, these were all his own means. This time, he came to see the sword god to see if the sword god had a way to protect himself. The sword god said, "It seems that you have been preparing for this for a long time, right? Did you come to me because you think it's time?" Han Fei nodded. But no matter how much preparation I make, I can't predict the specific situation of the war. On the battlefield, all accidents can happen. If Senior can help me, my odds of winning can reach 60%. The sword god pondered for a long time. In fact, breaking through the investiture of the god's heaven and killing Huang Jinyuan was not very good for him, because Huang Jinyuan didn't target the human race except for the mermaid royal family. Han Fei asked for an equal share of resources. Although the amount was considerable, he was not short of resources. Even if he got them, he would only give them to the kings of the heavenly sword heaven. Therefore, what Han Fei really wanted to confirm with him this time was to see if he was going to bet on him. The sword god was silent for a moment and looked at the sword in the sword casting pool. After a long time, he said, "Half an hour. If we can't conquer the investiture of the god's heaven in half an hour, retreat immediately." Han Fei immediately grinned. "Thank you, Senior." The sword god nodded. "Don't thank me yet. If you want to kill Huang Jinyuan, even I can't do it. So, you need to suffer a little." Han Fei smiled and said, "If I can kill an emperor, what's a little suffering? What do you want, Senior?" The sword god nodded. "I want to give you a sword strike." Chapter 2042. 1 month later. 9 Palace Heaven. What? Last time you attacked the Grand Purity Palace, and now you want to kill an emperor? Han Xian was furious. His nephew was good at everything and had great potential. It could be said that he was invincible in the Pioneer Sea realm. However, he was too aggressive. Anyway, when Han Fei dragged Han Xian to fight, Han Xian was really shocked. "Brother, do you want to reconsider? I heard that he is a super strong master comparable to the sword god." Han Fei shook his head and said, "I have made up my mind. Senior sword god will fight with me. In addition, if you count Uncle Xian, there are a total of 25 kings. Uncle Xian, if you're really worried, why don't you support a few kings?" Although Han Xian seemed to be the only king in 9 Palace Heaven, Han Xian also said that every time the Imperial Palace opened, there would be strong masters in 9 Palace Heaven. After tens of thousands of years, there must be a lot of people who survived. Han Fei believed that there must be someone among them who could be called a king. The most obvious point was the information channel that Han Xian had mastered. Although 9 Palace Heaven was closed, he could always get first-hand information. Someone must have passed it to him in Martial Emperor City. Han Fei said, "Uncle Xian, the investiture of God's heaven. If we could take it down, how many resources will we get? 100 billion won't be enough. And all kinds of resources and treasures, countless." The corner of Han Xian's mouth twitched, and he said helplessly, "Are you so confident that you can kill Huang Jinyuan?" Han Fei said, "I just can't kill Huang Jinyuan. With so many kings, how can investiture heaven resist us? Do you think Senior Sword God, me, and 25 kings can't defeat investiture heaven?" Han Xian couldn't help asking, "Where did you get 25 kings? How many do you have in Yin-Yang heaven and Waterwood heaven? Even if there are, they should not be strong, right?" Han Fei said leisurely, "Yin-Yang heaven and Waterwood heaven have 13 in total. Except for me, the strongest one can enter the top 20 on the Pioneer Sea list. In addition to these, I have reported the major pirate groups that have cooperated with us one by one. And Han Xian's eyelids twitched wildly. Han Fei is really going all out this time. With such a huge lineup, it was clear that they were determined to take down Godbane Heaven. Han Xian said, "Ever since the end of days, there has never been a monarch of the chaotic azure sea who has fallen. Although I believe that I can barely block a sovereign for a while, that's only against someone like Xian Qingzi, who has just split open the heavens. Do you really dare to suppress all the forces of the yin-yang heaven?" Han Fei roared, "Suppress them. I swore that the God-sealing heaven, the supreme purity palace, and a limitless heaven won't be able to escape. I'm going to take them down one by one. Uncle Xian, this is how I will walk the path of splitting open the heavens." Han Xian's expression changed. He lowered his head to look at his Qianji godly ghost disc and took a deep breath. "Good. Then I will accompany you on this journey. Just as the sword god said, if you can't take him down in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, you must not continue fighting." Han Fei nodded. "Of course. If we can't take down the seal god's heaven in half an hour after gathering so many forces, I will lie low for 100 years and then take action again." Han Xian and Han Yin were speechless at Han Fei's passionate words. What did it mean to lie dormant for 100 years? Was 100 years a long time? You haven't even fought once in 10,000 years. You call lying low for 100 years? However, thinking of Han Fei's abnormal growth speed, Han Xian thought that maybe this was Han Fei's path. Only in this way could he grow so rapidly. He thought that if his nephew could split open the heavens, he could even share his experience with him. Of course, Han Xian himself was actually short of resources. Not to mention that kings didn't lack resources. Han Fei had spent hundreds of billions of resources in the Origin Sea, and he hadn't even reached the Pioneer Sea realm yet. Although the Nine Palace Heaven had been dormant for a long time, it couldn't enjoy the resources alone. So in terms of resources, it was still seriously short of resources. Seeing that Han Xian agreed, Han Fei reached out and rubbed Einer's head. "Don't worry. Anyway, your brother still has an incarnation here. What are you afraid of? Besides, even the emperors couldn't kill me. He's just Huang Jingyuan. What right does he have to kill me?" Einer, Han Xian asked, "When will we do it?" Han Fei replied, 1 month from today." Han Xian's eyelids twitched. "So soon?" Han Fei nodded. Speed is everything. Han Fei was now very proficient in using the nautical panorama. During the 30 years when Han Fei was in seclusion, he had secretly searched for the God-sealing heaven and found it. Not only did he find it, but he also sneaked around it several times with the Gemini divine technique. However, because the God-sealing heaven had been closed and the city-protecting array had been activated, it was impossible for Han Fei to break in. This was why Han Fei had to prepare for it for so long. 7 days later, in the dense fog sea, Han Fei stayed alone for a full 7 days, and no one knew what he did. Another half a month later, in a place far away from the fog sea, at least 30 million kilometers away from the God-sealing heaven. At this moment, the God-sealing heaven, the Waterwood Heaven, the Demon Beast Alliance, and the Forest of Horrors. A total of 13 kings had been waiting here. Swish, 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 one figure after another broke out of the void. Among them were Xian Feng of the Witch Pirates, Chun Guangjia of the Gale Pirates, Zhou Chun of the Misfortune Pirates, and Shui Ran of the Red Fire Pirates. These people didn't know the kings of the Yin-Yang Heaven and the Waterwood Heaven. Of course, Xian Feng knew him. When she saw Run Tianfei, she was slightly stunned and then nodded her head imperceptibly. Ren Tianfei also had mixed feelings. After so many years, he finally met an old acquaintance. At this moment, Chun Guangjia and the others all gasped. Han Fei didn't lie to us. So many kings? Zhou Chan said, but there are not as many as 25. Shui Ran said, the sword god didn't show up either. Xian Feng said, let's wait. Swish, swish, swish. At this moment, the void moved and a golden light flashed. Everyone took a closer look. It was Han Fei, and Shui Ran was surprised. Is this Xiaoyu? Xiaoyu from a flying feather heaven? Chen Guangjia exclaimed, Huh? Is that Li Yingtian from the thoughtless heaven? And Wu Xin from the thoughtless heaven? Zhou Chun said, Jiang Lian from the white cloud heaven, Gao Bieli from the Lian heaven, Yang Song from the silver moon heaven, Lin Beichen from the beast king heaven. These lost masters of the immortal palace are all here? At this moment, Zhou Chun and the others looked at each other. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed it. When Xiaoyu and the others arrived, they first glanced around. When they saw Xianfeng and Zhou Chun, they also had some impression of them. They were just not familiar with each other. However, Shui Ran went straight to Gao Bieli from the Lian heaven, his face flushed. Palace Master. The kings couldn't help but look at Shui Ran. They only knew that Shui Ran was the captain of the Red Fire Pirates, but they didn't know that Shui Ran was from the Lian heaven. Gao Bieli nodded slightly and then looked at Han Fei. Is everyone here? 24 kings had gathered here. At this moment, a man in black armor appeared. As soon as this person appeared, Xiaoyu and the others were shocked. Han Xian said with a smile. Everyone, long time no see. Jiang Luyun said, I didn't expect you to still be alive. Yang Song said, Han Xian, how have you been? Everyone got to know each other. And then Han Fei said, Senior Sword God, how is it? Yes. It seems that you really spent a lot of effort to take action this time. Everyone looked sideways and saw a figure slowly solidifying in the void, turning into a person. Who else could it be but the Sword God? The kings were all shocked. Han Fei was strong enough to affect the situation of the chaotic Azure Sea. He actually invited the Sword God to attack the investiture of God's heaven. This was a big bet. When Han Fei went to find them, he had made it clear that this operation was no small matter. And this was also an opportunity for them to let the immortal palaces return. If the chaotic ocean really changed, how could these lost immortal palaces not want to come back? They also knew that the immortal palaces must be a place with a lot of resources. They wanted to come back, but with their strength, how could they resist so many strong masters? If there was a heaven-opening realm cultivator among these lost immortal palaces, they would immediately choose to return to the chaotic ocean. Unfortunately, they chose to leave, and not even one heaven-opening realm cultivator appeared. Han Fei said, Everyone, you have seen the people who came this time. This operation is all king-level cultivators carrying out a surprise attack. This king and senior sword god will attack the emperor of the investiture of God's heaven, Huang Jingyuan. The rest of you can move in groups. If you encounter a strong king, the strong will take priority, or you can encircle him. I don't believe that the investiture of God's heaven has more king-level cultivators than us. Finally, in this operation, the spoils of war will be divided, and the resources will be distributed according to how much effort you put in. Everyone, this is a battle that will determine the situation of the chaotic ocean, a battle that will change the chaotic ocean. I, Han Fei, said that I will unify the 36 black heavens. I promise that when I control the 36 black heavens, the human race will be one, and we will create a prosperous era for the human race. Chapter 2043. Han Fei's pre-war mobilization was impassioned. In front of the sword god, Han Fei even said that he wanted to unify the 36 Xuantians without any scruples. Han Fei had already raised this question when he went to the heavenly sword heaven. At that time, Han Fei's reason for persuading the sword god was, only when this place is peaceful will the outside world be prosperous. You should expand your territory and walk the path of a human sovereign. Perhaps, Han Fei's words were useless to others. However, it was extremely useful for the heaven-opening stage. In the chaotic Azure Sea, those who could reach the heaven-opening realm were all pioneers of their generation. They all relied on their own abilities to cross the river by groping for stones. Therefore, regardless of whether it was Daiyuan, Bei Luochun, or the Sword God, all of them were extraordinary. They had relied on their own understanding of the great Tao and their exploration of the origin sea to reach where they were today. How could an ordinary person understand the hardships involved? And the more powerful an expert was, the more they needed to exchange pointers and experience with those in the same realm. This was the path that a monarch needed to take. Since it was possible to become an emperor, no one was willing to just be an emperor. Who didn't want to become an emperor? Who didn't want to achieve immortality? Even if the god of swords was searching for the path of the sword, he couldn't just shut himself in, right? Therefore, Sword God did not care whether the 36 profound heavens were unified or not. What they cared about was how to get past the Arch Palace and leave this place. The kings weren't stupid. Even the Sword God didn't object to it. Han Fei looked at the Sword God. Senior Sword God, I may need you to help me break the protective array of the divine heaven. If there's a need, I can help you. For this assault, Han Fei had saved a lot of immortal spiritual energy and fierce spiritual energy, which were enough for him to burst out 100 times in his strongest state. This was also the reason why he used up the resources so quickly, because, relatively speaking, he could convert more immortal spiritual energy and fierce spiritual energy. Sword God said, if you attack together, it will be even better. We can break in one go. Han Fei smiled. No problem. Then Han Fei said, everyone, let's go. In an all-out war like this, there was no such thing as a sneak attack. As long as the great city protecting array was not broken, there was no possibility of sneak attack. Otherwise, there would be no need for the major immortal palaces to set up a protective formation. This was to prevent people from invading, to warn the various experts in the city, giving them time to react. However, just like the yin-yang skies, heaven, and earth-nature formation, this formation might be able to block the attacks of a king. However, in the face of the power of the heaven-opening stage, especially the power of the Sword God, it was very difficult to resist. After all, back when the human powerhouses built the fairy palace, they were still only challengers. Even if they were constantly growing and strengthening the great city protecting formation, it was still difficult for them to rely on the formation to block the heaven-opening stage. They weren't people of 9 palace heaven, so they weren't smart and didn't walk the path of formations. Therefore, when Han Fei and the Sword God attacked at the same time, Huang Jingyuan suddenly opened his eyes in the god-sealing heaven. His expression suddenly turned cold, and his voice reverberated throughout the entire God's Bane heaven. Kings, enemies have invaded. Prepare to fight. Huang Jingyuan looked through the void. When he saw Sword God and Han Fei, although he was surprised and confused, he wasn't too shocked. Han Fei was too aggressive and vengeful. He had expected that Han Fei would come looking for trouble. However, Huang Jingyuan never expected that Han Fei would come only 30 years after the trip to the Imperial Palace. In 30 years, Han Fei might not even be able to digest 1/10 of the gains from the trip to the Imperial Palace, let alone the heaven-opening stage. In his opinion, it was impossible for the growth of the sea-opening stage to be so fast. How could someone cross the entire heaven-opening stage in just 50 or 60 years? If you wanted to cross it, you had to have the resources. Strengthening the origin sea, the allocation of resources, and the shaping of the world, how could they be done so easily? However, Han Fei came, and he came at the Sword God. Huang Jingyuan knew that the Godbane heaven would definitely suffer a great loss this time, but he didn't think that they could defeat the Godbane heaven, nor did he think that the Sword God could kill him. If the Sword God had this ability, how could the Grand Pure Wuji still exist? Since the Sword God couldn't defeat the Grand Pure Wuji, how could he defeat him? To put it bluntly, if the Sword God used the God's arrival technique, the Sword God was probably not his opponent. As for Han Fei, even if he was invincible in the sea opening stage and ranked first on the sea opening list, so what? If he couldn't open the sky, the origin sea couldn't blend with heaven and earth, and the aura of the Great Way couldn't run naturally. Even if he could burst out the combat power of the heaven-opening stage for a while, he could only fight with Xian Qingzi for a while at most. It was even unknown whether he could last more than 100 minutes in the hands of Xian Qingzi. Han Fei couldn't hurt him. Swish, swish, the Sword God had already held a sword in his hand. This sword was glowing red and sealed by the scabbard. On the way here with Han Fei, the Sword God's hand had never left the hilt of the sword. Han Fei could feel that the sword god's aura had increased exponentially. The sharp sword intent on his body made him feel that his soul was about to be pierced. Even within 1,000 kilometers of the sword god, Han Fei could feel the sizzling sound on the surface of his body. There were even white marks on his body, and a trace of golden blood appeared. It was cut by the invisible sword aura. It could be seen how terrifying the sword god's sword was. And Han Fei, of course, didn't want to be outdone. Relying on his abundant chaotic qi, he could use the Great Way of Time to reverse time in half an hour. Therefore, when he attacked, Han Fei directly operated the Great Way, opened the invincible eye, performed the law of heaven and earth, swallowed the 5th-layer Tao pattern pill, and fished out a 7th-grade soul calming pill. From the beginning, Han Fei went all out. He didn't even use the dragon transformation technique. The reason why he didn't use the dragon transformation technique was that there were too many kings here, and they would all submit to him in the future. If he used the dragon transformation technique, the kings would be shocked. Can you still turn into a dragon? Who the hell are you? For these kings, their ability to accept was very strong. There were billions of creatures in the world. What kind of creatures couldn't they accept? But at that time, if Han Fei was allowed to rule the human race, not so many people would be able to accept it. Han Fei's law of heaven and earth was thousands of meters tall. Yes, this time Han Fei was no longer more than 500 meters tall. Otherwise, he would have lived 1,000 years in vain. The real law of heaven and earth was 33,000 meters tall. His was considered ordinary. Han Fei could still become bigger, but there was no need to do so. When he was less than 100,000 kilometers away from the investiture of God's heaven, he heard a clang, and Han Fei saw the sword god draw out his sword from the corner of his eye. Suddenly, his eyes were bloodshot, but this didn't make Han Fei shrink his eyes. A sword poured out, like a galaxy hanging upside down, carrying the void for thousands of kilometers, turning into a sword wave. And Han Fei followed up with a divine, killing aura. The power of the divine demon was fierce and powerful, like the intertwining of light and darkness. Wherever it passed, the spiral sword tip pierced through layers of ripples. Behind, Han Xian, Run Tianfei, the masters of the major immortal palaces invited by Han Fei, Zhou Chun, and the others, were shocked as they rushed to catch up. It was understandable that the sword god could exert such terrifying power, but Han Fei had only been in the sea expansion stage for a few years. How could he exert such terrifying power? In the face of such power, even Han Xian felt that even if he was in the 3rd form of the Qianji divine ghost disc, he might not be able to resist it. Even if he did, he would probably be seriously injured. And if Han Xian was seriously injured, the other kings who came here would basically be dead. Zhang Xuanyu chased after them. Seeing Han Fei's domineering scene, he was not shocked but just sighed with emotion. Zhang Xuanyu said, "Quang Quang, you must be strong this time and use your strongest state. I finally understand that only by grabbing enough resources can you become stronger and expand your origin sea crazily." Luren Quang nodded. "My Tao devours the world. I could devour it on the spot." Xia Xiaochan said, "Fatty, your origin sea is really strange. You can keep expanding as long as you eat treasures." Luren Quang chuckled. It was really difficult to cultivate in the beginning, but after becoming a king, it became faster. Maybe this is the advantage of this Tao. Luo Xiaobai added, "Okay, get ready to fight. The 4 of us will fight together. Remember to stay away from Han Fei and the others. He and Senior Sword God are going to slaughter the Emperor. Don't get close to their battlefield." Xia Xiaochan added, "Let's go with Uncle Xian. Uncle Xian is the strongest here. If there is an emergency, at least he can guarantee our safety." Zhang Xuanyu and Lu Renquang nodded. What she said made sense. This was the principle they had always followed. Rumble, boom, crack, crack, crack. Han Fei and the Sword God were naturally much faster than the others. So at the moment when Han Fei and the Sword God attacked, most of the others were still hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, and this was the result of Han Fei and the Sword God deliberately waiting for them. A layer of protective barrier appeared in the formless land of nothingness. But as soon as this barrier appeared, the true appearance of the investiture of God's heaven was revealed. In just less than 3 breaths' time, the protective formation of the city was shattered into pieces. It couldn't resist the full blow of the sword god and Han Fei at all. Even though the city-protecting array was broken and Han Fei's immortal killing aura was exhausted, the sword god's terrifying sword was still absorbing the power of the investiture of God's heaven's city-protecting array and turning it upward. At that moment, Han Fei grabbed the nautical panorama and pointed it at the sky tens of thousands of kilometers away. With a flip of his hand, Han Fei burst out another immortal killing aura, and then the sword god rushed out again, roaring, "Huang Jingyuan, come out and die." Chapter 2044. Investiture Heaven. The moment Han Fei and the sword god charged in, they found that there were very few humans in Investiture Heaven. The population of such a large Investiture Heaven was almost the same as that of 9 Palace Heaven. However, although there were few people, there were many strong ones. At the moment when the city protection array was broken, there were more than 6,000 venerables who came out. And that was only those who came out first. Those who didn't come out in time hadn't been counted yet. Han Fei glanced at the city guards and found that there were as many as 11 people. Han Fei was speechless. Were there more kings in Investiture Heaven than in the Grand Purity Palace? One had to know that quite a few kings of Godbane Heaven had fallen in the past. As far as Han Fei knew, there might be 3 or 4 who died in Chun Huangdian's hands. There were at least 3 who died in his hands. These kings didn't attack Han Fei and the sword god at first. They were not idiots. It was impossible that they didn't know these two, especially the sword god, who was a heaven-opening state powerhouse. He was the only great sword cultivator in the chaotic vast ocean and the only super powerhouse who specialized in sword Dao. In terms of lethality, if a sword cultivator claimed to be second, who dared to claim to be first? As for Han Fei, who dared to say that they had the ability to block the 1,000-foot-tall Dharma idol and the deity Baleful Qi. Besides, Han Xian and the others were only 100,000 kilometers away from the main city. At this moment, they all sped up and rushed into Investiture Heaven. Han Fei and the sword god soared into the sky, and Han Fei shouted to the kings, "The people of Investiture Heaven have all betrayed the human race and become the puppets of the evil emperor. There are no innocents in this battle. This is war." Under normal circumstances, Han Fei wouldn't start a war in the main city. A large number of ordinary people were killed and injured, which was not a good thing. However, Investiture Heaven had a small population. If the kings died from the aftershock, no king would feel that they had killed anyone. In a battle like this, who knows if it was my remnant might that killed you, or if it was the remnant might have someone else that killed you. Therefore, Han Fei called it war because there were no innocents on the battlefield. If the ordinary people of Godbane Heaven died, then they could only blame themselves for appearing on the battlefield. But in fact, when Han Fei shouted, he saw hundreds of half-king realm powerhouses, together with the 11 kings of Godbane Heaven, ready to fight Han Xian and the other kings. Each and every one of them had a triangular mark on their foreheads, and they all used God's descent at the same time. Han Fei's face darkened. This wasn't good. Although it was still difficult for a half-king realm cultivator to enter the sea expansion realm after using the God's descent technique, it wasn't something that could be killed with a casual blow. However, from another perspective, there were indeed no good people here. Every single Exalt Realm expert was branded with a triangular brand. Obviously, it was some sort of special symbol. Anyone with this symbol would know God's descent. Anyone who knew the God's descent technique was no good. They were all enemies. However, Han Fei and the sword god couldn't care less about the battle below. The reason why Han Fei had gathered so many kings was to completely destroy the God-sealing heaven. His original intention was that if there were a large number of ordinary people here, he would let Han Xian carry the main city away first. When the time came, he would let the outer 13 heavens divide up Godbane Heaven's population and resources. Now, seeing that there were basically no ordinary people here, why should he care about them? They could just start a war and plunder resources. Now, Han Fei and the sword god sword intent soared into the sky, aimed at the void node of the godbane heaven, and attacked together again. This time, it was more direct. The small world where the divine palace was located in the godbane heaven was broken. The place where the divine palace was located was a void gap, an independent small world. Han Fei could break through the small world of the divine palace in the 5 elements in the early stage. Now that he and the sword god attacked at the same time, it was a piece of cake for them to break the small world of the godbane heaven. All of this was within Han Fei's expectations, and everything went quite smoothly. However, he didn't know what would happen next. The real war also began at this moment. It was as if a huge crack had been opened in the sky. At this moment, a divine palace descended. The sword god said, "Remember, 30 minutes." Han Fei nodded. He knew that if he couldn't take it down within 30 minutes, he couldn't take it down. Above the divine palace, behind Huang Jingyuan, the triangular divine seal was rotating slightly, and Huang Jingyuan's strength had obviously been raised to the strongest state. Under Huang Jingyuan's feet, behind him, and above his head, an extremely high-level power was continuously pouring into him. Celestial spiritual energy? Han Fei immediately recognized what it was. It was clearly the celestial spiritual energy that only the heaven-opening state could release. Along with the celestial spiritual energy, Huang Jingyuan also absorbed some chaotic qi. Pa, 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 cracking noises came from Huang Jingyuan's body. Han Fei knew that it was the release of chaotic energy. Huang Jingyuan said slowly, "How can the two of you conquer the godbane heaven?" Huang Jingyuan raised his hands and pushed out his palms. There was a strange seal on his palms. With the celestial spiritual energy continuously gushing out of the divine palace, he blocked the attacks of the sword god and Han Fei at the same time. BM, ripples appeared one after another in the sky, spreading out for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Han Fei felt that his deity's termination qi was blocked and offset by the infinite energy when it was 3 feet away from Huang Jingyuan. This shocked Han Fei. How much power was stored in Huang Jingyuan's body? Even if it was sword god sword, under that strange seal, ka, sounds could be heard as it advanced forward 7 times. When it was 3 inches away from him, there was a ka-cha sound as sword god sword was destroyed. Cough! The sword god and Huang Jingyuan coughed at the same time, and blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. Obviously, they were injured at the same time. Therefore, Huang Jingyuan's main strength was used to deal with the sword god. Although Han Fei's immortal fierce qi was also the power of the heaven-opening state, Huang Jingyuan obviously didn't care much about it, and it was easily obliterated by him. The heaven-opening divine technique descended, and a healing divine light instantly enveloped the sword god. This was Han Fei's confidence. The sword god's internal injuries almost instantly recovered by half. Originally, the peak power that erupted from the heaven-opening battle was probably unimaginable. Whether it was the sword god or Huang Jingyuan, neither of them were body cultivators, so when bearing such terrifying power, they could only obliterate it with a great way. However, with the assistance of the heaven-opening divine technique, the effect was naturally different. This meant that as long as Han Fei was there, the sword god could attack recklessly, crazily, and endlessly without worrying about being overwhelmed. This was the fundamental reason why the human king could fight the war queen Xia Hongzhu to a draw. Therefore, the moment the heaven-opening divine technique appeared, Huang Jingyuan knew that he couldn't underestimate Han Fei. Although his combat power was not strong enough, it was still comparable to the power of the heaven-opening state. He even felt that Han Fei might be comparable to Xian Qingzi. If Han Fei supported the sword god with the heaven-opening divine technique, who could resist him? Therefore, Huang Jingyuan forcibly pushed the two back, and a pagoda appeared in his hand. The sword god shouted, "Be careful!" But Han Fei retreated quickly. But the pagoda had already caught up and seemed to want to suppress Han Fei. This was Huang Jingyuan's weapon, which was said to be a human holy artifact, called the 7-star soul suppressing pagoda. Since this pagoda was a human holy artifact, it had its own characteristics. Because Huang Jingyuan rarely fought, most people didn't know what the seven-star soul-suppressing pagoda was for. However, Han Fei wasn't afraid. With a flip of his hand, he took out a knife. On this knife, flames were rolling and the firepower was threatening. It was the Phoenix Featherwild knife. In the past 1,000 years, of course, Han Fei had already refined the Phoenix Featherwild knife. Of course, it was impossible for him to use the full power of the Phoenix Featherwild knife. However, the Phoenix Featherwild knife was a mid-quality divine weapon after all. Han Fei used the draw technique that he hadn't used for a long time. Fire waves raged in the sky. The power of a divine weapon didn't require Han Fei to use his full strength. Even if he didn't use his full strength, the power of a divine weapon actually cracked the seven-star soul, suppressing pagoda. Huang Jingyuan's face changed, and he couldn't help but look at the knife in Han Fei's hand, his voice cold. A divine weapon? Seeing this, the sword god couldn't help but open the sword domain, and his sword was like starlight covering the sky. Huang Jingyuan naturally knew the power of the seven-star demon suppressing pagoda. It was just a human holy weapon. If you had to fight a divine weapon, you couldn't force it. Besides, a human holy weapon was not used as a weapon most of the time. So when Huang Jingyuan was wrapped in the sword domain, he shouted in a low voice, "Seven stars releasing demons, seven gods appear, swish, swish." Swish. Han Fei was about to smash the seven-star demon suppressing pagoda, but he saw 7 rays of light bursting out of the pagoda. When the lights and shadows appeared, Han Fei found that they were actually 7 strange-looking people. These 7 people were all in the Pioneer Sea realm, and each of them looked quite strong. Han Fei felt that they all had the power of the top 10 in the Pioneer Sea realm. Is this Huang Jingyuan's backup plan? The 7 gods cultivated the 7 great daos of wind, thunder, fire, electricity, wood, water, and earth, which could be seen from the power they showed. Among them, Thunderlord's body flashed with electric arcs, and he rushed at Han Fei as fast as lightning. The 7 kings besieged him, the violent strike of thunder, the wind fire, the void vine, and the earth seal. Almost in an instant, Han Fei was tightly locked. It was as if he was trapped in a cage. However, Huang Jingyuan, do you think you can trap me as a king now? Chapter 2045. Han Fei didn't expect that Investiture Heaven would be conquered so easily. It seemed that it was a wise choice to call so many kings. According to Han Fei's estimation, Huang Jingyuan might be able to fight against 2 kings in his territory. Han Fei even suspected that there might be a second heaven-opening state in Investiture Heaven. However, if so, he wouldn't have been able to escape when he was in the Savage Abyss. Given the Godbane Heaven's nature, it was as if the sole purpose of their existence was to kill Xia Shaochan. How could they let go of such an excellent opportunity? That was why Han Fei dared to take the risk. However, he didn't expect that although there was no second heaven-opening state in Investiture Heaven, there were 7 kings. Han Fei wasn't afraid. If there was only one, he could kill it easily. But there were 7 of them, and he felt that they might be in the top 10 of the sea-opening realm. Han Fei sighed slightly. I wanted to hide my strength, but I'm afraid I can't hide it anymore. Thud in the blockade. Han Fei's sacrificing punch broke the 4 barriers of wind, earth, water, and wood in a row, and a shadow flashed out. What was it if not the ultimate blade? Swish, 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 puff, puff, puff. With the power of the sea-opening realm, it was difficult to block the ultimate blade if it wasn't the kind with strong defensive power. The first one Han Fei killed was the king who controlled water. This person was frozen so fast that he could even freeze the void. If Han Fei didn't kill him, the freezing of the void would greatly affect his performance. Therefore, almost in an instant, the king was riddled with holes. But the other party was not a fool. After realizing that Han Fei had such a powerful weapon, the king directly dove into the water and disappeared from Han Fei's sight. However, this person probably didn't know that not everyone could escape from Han Fei's eyes. At the moment when the cage was broken, when the sacrificing punch burst out, the black fog also went out. Han Fei combined the Gemini divine technique and appeared outside the blockade. With the Yin Yang divine eyes, The ultimate blade pierced thousands of enemies in an instant, and Han Fei rushed over and smashed with the void lines. The king of the Tao of Water didn't expect that Han Fei could break the blockade of the Seven Kings so easily and with such a terrifying method. With a bang, a crack appeared in the sky, and a king had died. You almost fooled me. I said that if these 7 people could all enter the top 10 of Sea Expansion, then the 36 Xuantians and the Grand Pure Everlasting Tao wouldn't even have a chance. Your God-sealing heaven could just unify the human race. So it's just a king puppet, a piece of trash that was forcefully piled up. When Han Fei killed a person so easily, he felt that something was wrong. This was different from Pang Jia, who had killed the 100 Demon Clan. Pang Jia's defensive power was enough to place him in the top 10 of the Sea Expansion realm. But the one he had killed was at most on par with the Snow Woman. But her blood chi was clearly in the top 10 of Sea Expansion. If he had cultivated all the way to the peak of the Sea Opening realm, then his strength would not have been so weak. Moreover, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape the eyes of Sword God and Han Xian. Since these people had never appeared in the chaotic Azure Sea, and they were so strong, there was only one answer. They were blood and flesh puppets. Han Fei said lazily, 1. In the void, the cage was ineffective and immediately collapsed, and countless vines wrapped around Han Fei. Moreover, strange demon plants that looked like sea urchins filled the void for thousands of miles. Whoosh, 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 every sharp thorn of the demon plants was highly toxic. The King of Thunder was obviously a strong attacker. He controlled lightning and restrained Han Fei from multiple angles, creating opportunities for the others. However, when a lightning flashed, Han Fei suddenly grabbed a mirror in his hand. It was the infinity mirror that he got from the Imperial Palace. There was a flash of lightning, but nothing happened. The lightning completely disappeared from the mirror. Han Fei smiled slightly. 2. One strong attacker and one supporting defense were gone. The remaining 5 people were obviously messed up. The Master of the Great Tao of Earth was distracted and gave up control of the situation. Han Fei smiled, put away the mirror, and launched a divine killing aura at the Master of the Great Tao of Earth. When the divine killing aura rushed over, a gust of wind rose, a fire domain covered, and 3,000 shadow doppelgangers attacked Han Fei at the same time. Except for the masters of the Great Tao of Earth, and wood who were restrained by the ultimate blade and the infinity water, the rest took the opportunity to attack Han Fei. Han Fei ignored the poison needles, waved his hand, and time decelerated. Silver light flashed in his eyes, and he shouted, "Sky collapses!" Han Fei's eyes flashed, and an illusion appeared in the void. In their eyes, Han Fei's figure suddenly became a 10,000-kilometer-tall divine body, and he was slapping down with earth-shattering power. Just as they were about to stop the gigantic hand that was descending from the sky, they suddenly realized that the situation was not good. It was an illusion, and they had fallen for it. However, when Han Fei came back to his senses, he saw that the king of the Great Tao of Wood was vomiting blood while controlling countless demon plants to block in front of him. It turned out that Han Fei's attack on the Master of the Great Tao of Earth was just a camouflage. The illusion was only to cover up the fact that he wanted to kill the king of the Great Tao of Wood. The king of the Great Tao of Wind tried to rescue him by blocking Han Fei's divine killing aura with a wind barrier. He wanted to save his teammate first. However, as soon as he appeared next to the Master of the Great Tao of Wood, he was pierced by a vine behind him. It turned out that this person had been controlled. Puff! The wind barrier was suddenly destroyed, and this person was crushed into dust by the divine killing aura. Rumble, cracks appeared in the sky. In the blink of an eye, this was the 3rd Pioneer Sea Realm Master to die. Han Fei's voice shook the world. The 3rd one. Down below, on the battlefield of the Investiture Heaven, the kings were all frightened. It was just the beginning, and 3 kings were already killed. Was the kings of the Investiture Heaven useless, or was Han Fei too strong? Zhang Xuanyu cursed. Or is it that guy? The disappointed kings of the celestial palaces were all frightened. They had been lured here by Han Fei in this way. Now, It seemed that Han Fei was really reckless. The king of the great Tao of wood was still here, and he provoked them like this. At this moment, Han Fei grinned. Bam! The kings exploded, and the terrifying impact directly flattened all the void rock shields in the sky. Han Fei's divine soul moved again, and the sky collapses burst out again. The remaining kings didn't care at all. Thinking that Han Fei was just playing the same trick, they all poured out their strongest attacks, trying to kill Han Fei. For example, the great Tao of fire released a purple-red flame that turned into a flaming man, rendering the surrounding space into a fiery domain, creating a fiery void and sealing this place. However, with a flash of blue light, Han Fei was gone. When he reappeared, he saw an yin-yang pattern falling from the top of this person's head. Yes, the sky-covering big hand turned into the supreme yin-yang wheel, and this person was almost obliterated in an instant. And the boundless fiery domain was crazily devoured by Little Black. Han Fei didn't care that someone found Little Black and Little White, because the great Tao of the yin-yang heaven was like this, and so was the inheritance. The twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fishes, so there was nothing to hide. The fourth one, 7 kings, even if they were not in the top 10 of the Pioneer Sea realm, as long as they cooperated well, there was no reason for them to die so quickly. Unfortunately, in terms of combat experience, these people were still not enough. Huang Jingyuan was overthinking. Besides, these people didn't know the god's arrival technique. Han Fei even suspected that although they were physical bodies and had souls, there might be something wrong with their souls, so they might not know how to pray and perform the god's arrival technique at all. At this moment, Han Fei felt a stinging pain in his soul. A shadow had bypassed his senses and tried to pierce his soul. However, the moment this person touched Han Fei's soul, he saw a weird picture. It was an incomparably huge divine statue. It was like a heavenly deity, its might suppressing the heavens. There seemed to be a roar of the great Tao ringing in his ears. Puff, puff, puff. Countless shadows collapsed, and Han Fei's 2 fingers had already touched the spot between his eyebrows. This person exploded, and Han Fei clenched the void lines. Another crack appeared, and this person died one after another. The 5th one, Han Fei couldn't help but sneer. The Void Sky Observation Technique, a super visualization technique ranked 11th in the Pioneer Sea realm. The soul blends with the sky and is tempered by the way of heaven. I imitate eldest senior brother to sit cross-legged and feel the baptism of the way of heaven all the time. Ordinary kings have never seen this appalling technique of soul refinement. How can it be shaken by just anyone? In just 10 minutes, 5 top kings had died in Han Fei's hands. Even if they were just flesh and blood puppets, it was enough to prove Han Fei's strength. The Sword God and Huang Jingyuan were fighting. The void turned into hundreds of millions of sword shadows, giving Huang Jingyuan no chance to intervene in other battles. At this moment, Huang Jingyuan was shocked. Even a real emperor couldn't kill kings so fast. The 7 king puppets attacked in an orderly manner, but they were defeated in the blink of an eye. In fact, Han Fei had created a flaw with the ultimate blade at the beginning. Then he killed a main attacker with the infinity mirror. As a result, the advantage of these people's cooperation was gone. In the confrontation of the remaining strong masters, it would be strange if these people could resist Han Fei in his heyday. 5 of the 7 gods died. Han Fei waved his hand, and the ultimate blade slashed at the man who walked the great path of earth. The man who walked the great path of wood, feeling the horror of Han Fei, turned into sword grasses and colorful poisons in the sky, trying to stop Han Fei. However, when it came to poison, Han Fei had never been afraid of it. Instead, Han Fei threw out a black, stinky liquid. The black mist swept in all directions, the void grasses withered, and a figure appeared. At the moment that person appeared, a golden light leaped over. Han Fei crushed this person with a punch and blew him up on the spot. Han Fei's current strength was as strong as 2 million waves. With a punch, he could collapse the void. A heaven-opening state cultivator could only be obliterated by the great path. How could a sea expansion state cultivator resist it? And if he was blown up in front of Han Fei, the consequences of this person could be imagined. He didn't even have a chance to be reborn before he was killed by Han Fei. Finally, it would be even more ridiculous for the expert who walked the great Tao of Earth to block Han Fei all by himself. Han Fei casually launched a Tao convergence sword. When the latter was resisting with all his strength, he suddenly felt a chill in his body. He looked down, only to see that his flesh and blood had disappeared. Han Fei sneered. How could Little Black, who had reached the sea expansion realm, resist his teeth? After only 2 seconds, when Han Fei tore this person apart, he heard a crack, and the 7-star soul suppressing pagoda broke and collapsed. Han Fei realized that this so-called 7-star soul suppressing pagoda turned out to have cultivated 7 kings. To be honest, if it weren't for a freak like Han Fei, these 7 gods could actually be very strong in the sea expansion realm. Together, they might be among the top 3 in the sea expansion realm. Unfortunately, they met Han Fei. At this moment, Han Fei looked at the immortal palace wrapped in billions of sword currents and shouted, Senior Sword God, let me help you. Chapter 2046. While Han Fei was fighting the 7 gods, Wang Zhan of the Investiture Heaven was also fighting fiercely. Although Han Fei brought a lot of kings this time, half of their strength was not enough. They were just beginners. When the real battle began, Muwa, Jin, Xiong Chao Shui, and others found that they couldn't even kill a half-king with one blow, which made their hearts go cold. Therefore, they worked even harder during the battle. Of course, a half-king was just a half-king. Even if they used the god's arrival technique, very few could survive 5 minutes under the attacks of a king. This led to an almost one-sided slaughter on the battlefield. However, this time, it was different from when Han Fei led the 4 pirate groups to raid the Dream Weaver Heaven. That time, it was purely a matter of fighting for resources at the same time. But this time, it was mainly to fight and grab resources. Because Han Fei's ultimate goal was to wipe out the entire Investiture Heaven, kill all the kings, and even kill the emperors. Therefore, under Han Fei's clear warning, even the 4 pirate groups didn't loot at all. They were completely suppressing the kings of the Investiture Heaven. Wang Zhan, for Han Fei now, it was just a matter of time. The appearance of the 7 god groups no longer had any meaning to him. Han Fei's only opponent now was the heaven-opening state. When Han Fei broke into the sword god's sword domain, before he knew what was going on, he coughed up blood because of the intertwining immortal spiritual energy and the piercing sword intent, and dense white marks appeared on his body. Fortunately, the void body refining art was so powerful that Han Fei could still resist the attack of the heaven-opening state. The residual power alone couldn't hurt Han Fei. Han Fei thought of something, and the ultimate blade rushed at Huang Jinyuan. Compared with the sword god's billions of sword streams and the supreme sword chi that frequently erupted here, the ultimate blade at least had an absolute advantage in speed. Although every time it got close to Huang Jinyuan, it was blocked by the armor condensed from immortal spiritual energy on the surface of his body, but it was still consumed. The sword god's sword and the blade that jumped out of the triangular divine seal twisted around the earth immortal palace, forming a void storm. The 3 of them were fighting in the void storm. Seeing that the 2 sides were in a stalemate, Han Fei looked at the infinity water in his hand and made up his mind. Senior Sword God, help me. As for the exploration of the infinity water, Han Fei seemed to have never really understood it. From turning it into a knife at the beginning, to self-detonation later, to learning that the infinity water could cut the Tao, it seemed to be even more powerful than a divine weapon. The sword god drew a sword diagram in front of him, and the phantom of a big sword was 30,000 kilometers long. The sword condensed into a shadow and rushed towards Han Fei. Sword god said, "In his celestial palace, as long as he doesn't come out, I can only exhaust him. It's impossible for me to win. If you can sever your Tao, you should give it a try with all your might." Han Fei thought to himself, of course I have to try. This time I'm here to kill an emperor. If I don't try, how do I know if I can do it? Han Fei stepped on the huge sword, and the infinity water covered his hand and turned it into a sword. Han Fei infused his soul power into it. The infinity water was fading and slowly turning into nothingness. Except for Han Fei himself, no one could see its existence anymore. But Huang Jingyuan was not a fool. Although it was ridiculous that Han Fei dared to come and kill him, what if Han Fei had hidden a trump card? In front of Huang Jingyuan, under the celestial palace, a black chain broke out of the ground and entangled the sword god's sword. The black chain was like a snake, and Han Fei pressed forward. At this time, he couldn't pin his hope on the golden light leap. The void turbulence here was growing crazily. If he didn't leap well, he would be swept into the void turbulence and swept into the deep, uninhabited place. With one hand, Han Fei prepared the infinity water, and with the other hand, the immortal spiritual energy and the fierce spiritual energy were intertwined. At the moment when the big sword collided with the chain, Han Fei took advantage of the momentum and continued to attack Huang Jingyuan. Humph! You're just a sea expansion realm cultivator. How dare you try to get involved in the battle of opening the sky? Han Fei, you're courting death. Huang Jingyuan raised his hand, and the triangular god sealing seal broke out of his body. A golden triangle of light rotated and grew bigger in the void, as if it had become a huge shield. However, when it was about to touch the triangular god sealing seal, a flash of blue light suddenly appeared in front of Han Fei, and then Han Fei disappeared. Han Fei thought it was perfect to avoid this blow from time, but as soon as he entered time, he saw a dazzling beam of light rushing into time and approaching him. What? BM, the fierce immortal collided with a mysterious beam of light. Terrifying forces clashed, and Han Fei immediately used the crafty time technique. In an instant, it was equivalent to Han Fei adding another fierce immortal. The two forces superimposed, and under the impact, Han Fei was barely able to resist that terrifying blow. At this time, when Han Fei came out of time and returned to reality, his face changed. Huang Jingyuan could see through time. Huang Jingyuan was also surprised. In the approaching time, he had just obtained the memory of what had just happened. In the past time, he used the void sky finger on Han Fei, but it was broken by this kid. Huang Jingyuan was puzzled. Where did this kid get the strength to break his void sky finger? Han Fei, who was knocked out of reality, raised his hand and cast another fierce immortal. Han Fei was determined to rely on this fierce immortal to fight head-on with Huang Jingyuan. But this time, Han Fei didn't dare to enter time because the other party could attack the river of time. Han Fei, this trick of yours may work on others, but it's meaningless to me. Meaningless? Haha. Han Fei suddenly smiled, and the next moment, a large amount of black water suddenly burst out beside Huang Jingyuan. Bam! A terrifying explosion broke out above the immortal palace. It turned out that from the moment he entered the sword domain to the moment Han Fei was knocked out of the river of time, he was just a body of white mist. When the infinity water turned into the water of nothingness, the real black fog had already left with the water of nothingness. Normally, the body of black mist wouldn't be able to get close to Huang Jingyuan. However, the sword god was erupting, so was Han Fei. Both of them had the combat power of the heaven-opening state. When the two heaven-opening techniques attacked at the same time, Huang Jingyuan could still split his attention to break through time, so he must have missed something. And this omission was Han Fei's body of black mist. However, when the infinity water slashed toward Huang Jingyuan's divine path, Huang Jingyuan clearly felt great danger, so he defended his divine soul immediately. At the moment when his soul was touched, Huang Jingyuan gave up part of it and directly pierced through the infinity water, which caused a terrifying explosion. And Han Fei's body of black mist was also directly collapsed under this blow. But fortunately, Han Fei immediately cast the heavenly awakening divine technique on himself after Gemini Unite. And Han Fei didn't take back the infinity water. After the explosion, he immediately activated the stinky liquid, turned it into a knife, and slashed at Huang Jingyuan. Clang, 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 unfortunately, after the infinity water exploded once, its power was greatly reduced. It couldn't break through Huang Jingyuan's defense. After all, the stinky liquid didn't touch Huang Jingyuan at all. Han Fei was knocked back, and the huge sword and the spiral chain collapsed at the same time. The joint attack of the sword god and Han Fei only injured Huang Jingyuan's soul. Besides, this kind of injury, for Huang Jingyuan, would only damage half of his soul at most. Although it was a pity, he could accept it. Huang Jingyuan said, Han Fei, you are still too weak after all. If it were 1,000 years later, you might be able to destroy the god's investiture heaven. But now you came too early. Do you really think that the god's investiture heaven really doesn't have a stronger force behind it? As he said, under the god's investiture palace, a weird altar with a black base and orange Taoist patterns emerged. On the altar, Taoist patterns flickered. Behind Huang Jingyuan, the god's investiture seal spun faster and faster, as if he couldn't wait to open a space gate. However, at this moment, Huang Jingyuan staggered slightly and suddenly stared at Han Fei, his eyes unfriendly. Han Fei shouted, Huang Jingyuan, do you feel that your body is cold and your blood is sluggish, as if billions of insects are biting you? Huang Jingyuan's face changed slightly. Did you use poison? Han Fei smiled and said, Congratulations, you guessed right. Huang Jingyuan's heart trembled. It was when Han Fei hit his soul, just now. It turned out that Han Fei didn't expect that blow to penetrate his soul at all. He just wanted to send a portion of soul poison in. Han Fei and the sword god looked at each other and nodded slightly. He saw the sword god approaching him in person. And this time, the sword god took out a black ancient sword, which was the sword god's life sword. 13th sword style, sword breaks the galaxy. The Emperor's life sword. Han Fei didn't expect that the sword god would go all out this time. Han Fei didn't want to give up the opportunity created by the sword god. When the sword god's life sword slashed out, Han Fei's hands burst out in a mortal killing intent. Although Huang Jingyuan had already pointed out that this move was useless, Han Fei's strongest move was this. If it was any stronger, he would have to sacrifice his divine weapon. Han Fei pointed at the void with the nautical panorama, and the Emperor's life sword hovered between Huang Jingyuan's eyebrows in the blink of an eye. However, this sword did not kill. Instead, it shook Huang Jingyuan's divine soul. Han Fei finally injected the soul poison into Huang Jingyuan's soul, weakening his combat power, just to create this moment of opportunity. Huang Jingyuan's face suddenly changed, and he shouted, Han Fei, you don't know what you're doing. Han Fei sneered. If I can't kill you from the outside, I'll start from the inside. I heard that your origin C carries the great way. I wonder if you can multitask and stop me from breaking your origin C. If he wanted to break into a living person's origin C, it was not as simple as finding a void node in the void. He had to enter through his soul. How could it be so easy to enter? However, Han Fei forcibly created this opportunity. When the void cracked, Han Fei leaped and flashed in. Chapter 2047. The reason why Han Fei dared to enter Huang Jingyuan's origin C was that he had the confidence to do so. His biggest source of confidence was the demon purification pot. However, in the origin C, this was a world that belonged to the cultivator. In this world, he could be said to be the master of the world and could use all the power in this world. Therefore, in Huang Jingyuan's view, Han Fei was digging his own grave by breaking into his origin C. Even if the sword god attacked from the outside, it couldn't shake his origin C. Swish, as soon as Han Fei entered Huang Jingyuan's origin C, he immediately felt the omnidirectional power collision. 3 triangular divine seals appeared around Han Fei, trying to directly obliterate Han Fei. However, Han Fei didn't panic at all. He had expected the danger of the origin C. If he hadn't been prepared, how could he have come in? With a swish, Han Fei pulled out a long array diagram. He saw that there were 18 evil immortals sealed in the array. That scene was equivalent to 18 heaven-opening state attacks at once. Even Huang Jingyuan had to deal with it carefully. He didn't know that Han Fei was crazy enough to draw so many heaven-opening state attacks with the power of the Sea Pioneer realm. Where did he get so much immortal spiritual chi and evil chi? After all, the triangular divine seal couldn't block so many evil immortals. After blocking more than a dozen evil immortals, it was finally broken. The remaining evil immortals were just about to attack Huang Jingyuan's Origin Sea, when the power in the Origin Sea turned into a cage and wrapped the 8 evil immortals again in a very short time. Boom, 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 the terrifying power was forcibly sealed by Huang Jingyuan in the Cage of Power. After all, this was Huang Jingyuan's own Origin Sea. As long as he thought about it, the power of the entire Origin Sea was under his control. No one knew how much Huang Jingyuan had paid to obliterate the 18 evil immortals that Han Fei had unleashed. The immortal spiritual blade, which was comparable to the power of the evil immortals, swept up hundreds of knives and slashed at Han Fei. Alas, Han Fei sighed slightly. Sure enough, in someone else's Origin Sea, no matter how many attacks there were, it didn't have much effect because someone could turn the world upside down with a thought and block all your attacks in an instant. Facing this terrifying knife condensed by a huge amount of immortal spiritual chi, Han Fei certainly didn't resist it. Once again, he performed the Dharma idol. His body, which was thousands of feet tall, shone with golden light. Facing the attack of a massive number of fairy blades, Han Fei suddenly opened his mouth and spurted out a bloody sword shadow. Hiding the sword in his body, Huang Jingyuan was shocked. If it was just Han Fei's own power, like the power of the immortal baleful chi, even if there were 18 more, he would still be able to block it. That was because he was being suppressed in terms of realm, strength, and the great Tao. However, the power that erupted from the Sword God Sword was on a different level from Han Fei's. If the Sword God Sword was so easy to block, then he wouldn't have to stay in the Immortal Palace and refuse to leave. After the blood-colored sword shadows spurted out of Han Fei's mouth, they didn't stop. Like a rainbow spewing out of his mouth, thousands of sword shadows burst out one after another. Back then, the sword god said that he would give him a sword, and what he gave him was the sword hidden in his body. This was the ultimate attack of the sword god. If it weren't for his strong physique, he wouldn't have been able to hide this sword at all. And this sword strike was originally used to help Han Fei cut the Tao, so it was particularly powerful. However, the sword god didn't know that Han Fei's method of cutting the Tao was actually to use the demon purification pot. So his sword strike was destroyed by Han Fei. As the sword shadows poured out, Han Fei felt comfortable all over his body. The massive immortal spiritual blades that were supposed to strangle him all rushed towards the rainbow spewed out by Han Fei. Clank, clank, clank. Bam, bam, bam. Even Huang Jingyuan had to mobilize a massive amount of energy as soon as possible, and even directly sealed and detonated the void within 8,000 kilometers of the Origin Sea in order to obliterate the Sword God Sword Strike. Han Fei saw that this guy was quite ruthless. In the blink of an eye, around Han Fei, tens of thousands of black, smelly liquid knives flew and scattered in all directions. Bam! Although the infinity water had exploded once, the power of the second explosion was still not to be underestimated. If it was the Sword God Sword, its attack range was still limited, but the self-explosion of the infinity water swept across the entire Origin Sea. Huang Jingyuan didn't expect that a mere Han Fei could make such a big noise in his Origin Sea. While restraining the Sword God Sword, he had to seal the Origin Sea again to prevent the smelly liquid from spreading. Because when the mist formed by the smelly liquid dissipated in his Origin Sea, everything in the Origin Sea was withering. It could be imagined how poisonous Han Fei's smelly liquid was. Because Huang Jingyuan had invested too much energy in the Origin Sea, in the outside world, the Sword God keenly seized the opportunity, slashed the triangular divine seal with his sword, and the sword shadow slashed into Huang Jingyuan's body. Puff! Blood gushed out of Huang Jingyuan's mouth. Half of his body exploded, and he was forcibly pushed to the altar that had just risen from below the Immortal Palace. A large amount of essence blood in Huang Jingyuan's body was absorbed by the altar, and behind him, a brand new, triangular divine seal appeared. And Huang Jingyuan's strength was also soaring crazily, and his injuries were also recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Huang Jingyuan grinned and said, "Do you think my investiture heaven is so easy to deal with? Do you think I did nothing in the past 30 years? God's descent. Huh?" At this moment, Huang Jingyuan found that something was wrong. He found that his power was fading at an extremely terrifying speed. In his origin sea, a few small vines couldn't help but grow out of the center of Han Fei's eyebrows. These few small vines were extremely magical, and they were madly absorbing the immortal spiritual qi and chaotic qi in his origin sea. As a result, the speed at which the immortal spiritual qi and chaotic qi was fading was even faster than when he was fighting with the sword god. "What's that?" Huang Jingyuan was furious, and he tried to crush Han Fei with a massive amount of immortal spiritual qi. However, as soon as the immortal spiritual qi approached Han Fei, he couldn't control it. "Impossible, what is that?" In the outside world, Huang Jingyuan's face changed drastically, and his rising aura suddenly dropped by half, as if his power had been sucked away. The sword god saw this, and thought that Han Fei must have done something in Huang Jingyuan's origin sea. Otherwise, Huang Jingyuan wouldn't have been like this, and even the power of his trump card had been sucked away. In this situation, the sword god naturally tried his best to contain Han Fei. And in the origin sea, Han Fei felt full for a long time. The amount of chaotic qi stored in the heaven opening stage and the sea expansion stage was different. In just a moment, he had absorbed more than 10,000 wisps of chaotic qi and nearly 5,000 wisps of immortal spiritual qi. Whether Huang Jingyuan was willing or not, the power of his origin sea was no longer completely under his control at this moment. Near Han Fei, the power that sealed the origin sea was taken away, and the stench spread out. The remaining power of the sword god's sword swept out crazily like the ripples of a nuclear explosion. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Huang Jingyuan tried to use the power of the origin sea to kill Han Fei several times, but it was useless. The area within 10,000 kilometers around Han Fei was completely out of control. Huang Jingyuan could only watch the countless resources and energy in his origin sea being swallowed by Han Fei like a whale. In just half an hour, Han Fei harvested more than 50,000 wisps of chaotic qi and more than 20,000 wisps of immortal spiritual qi. Outside, the sword god clearly felt that Huang Jingyuan's power was getting weaker and weaker. It had fallen by more than 30%, as Han Fei said, but by 50%. Huang Jingyuan's combat power fell by 50%, which meant that the power bonus of the god's arrival technique was almost gone. In this realm, Huang Jingyuan was no match for the sword god. Puff, puff, billions of sword streams, 10,000 swords piercing through the heart. The immortal spiritual energy gushing out from the immortal palace could no longer sustain Huang Jingyuan's high-intensity battle. Realizing that he was going to be obliterated, Huang Jingyuan roared, "Han Fei, how can I let you do that? God's arrival. I offer my flesh and blood to the arch to possess me." In the origin sea, Han Fei was absorbing happily. He felt that Huang Jingyuan would be drained by him in a few minutes or so. At this moment, Han Fei suddenly sensed a terrifying pressure. The demon purification gourd instantly disappeared without a trace. It had given up on absorbing the chaotic qi and the immortal qi. Although the demon purification pot didn't absorb these powers were still disappearing crazily, as if they were summoned by Huang Jingyuan himself. This surprised Han Fei. What's going on? Why is Huang Jingyuan summoning so much power at once? However, Old Yuan roared crazily in Han Fei's heart. Go, the Thearch is power, huh? Han Fei's face changed drastically. He activated the navigational Celestial Baleful Qi and launched the Celestial Baleful Qi. The Celestial Baleful Qi traveled thousands of kilometers and broke a small hole in Huang Jingyuan's origin sea, rushing out of Huang Jingyuan's origin sea. As soon as Han Fei came out, he heard the sword god roar, "Retreat! This is not the power of opening the sky." Han Fei rushed out and turned around, only to see that Huang Jingyuan's body was almost dried up. In his eyes, there was a very special color, cold, disdainful, and oppressive. At this moment, Huang Jingyuan looked at Han Fei and the sword god, and then at the main city of the god-sealing heaven. When his eyes fell on Xia Xiaochan, Han Fei's heart suddenly skipped a beat. F***CK. Is she the venerable emperor of the family? This person raised his hand and pointed at Xia Xiaochan. Swish, at this moment, Han Fei leaped with a golden light and appeared next to Xia Xiaochan. And Xia Xiaochan seemed to be moved, and she also looked up at the void at this moment. At this moment, Han Fei roared, "Everyone retreat." Chapter 2048. In the blink of an eye, Han Fei didn't expect that Huang Jingyuan had a way to be possessed by a venerable emperor. Wasn't it said that ordinary venerable emperors couldn't enter the chaotic ocean? Wasn't it said that the one from the martial emperor's city was guarding this place? If he had done this earlier, the chaotic ocean would have been destroyed long ago. Therefore, although Han Fei was surprised, he didn't think it was a venerable emperor who had been possessed. Even if this guy was really possessed by a venerable emperor, so what? Since when did a venerable emperor dare to be so arrogant in front of a disciple of the Void Temple? Han Fei was about to activate the Void Mark in his mind and ask his eldest senior brother to slap this guy to death. However, someone was faster than him. In Xia Xiaochan's body, a phantom swept across the sky. Who else could it be but Xia Hongzhu? Perhaps the so-called venerable emperor's possession had activated Xia Hongzhu's soul in Xia Xiaochan. So Xia Hongzhu appeared as soon as the opponent's pressure descended. Embark. Xia Hongzhu's voice was cold, but she also knew that this was not the time to vent her hatred blindly. She was just a soul. If this person was really Embark, he wouldn't be able to resist her. However, the opponent was only a strand of soul remembrance. This allowed her to silently sigh in relief. Xia Hongzhu shouted to Han Fei, "Take Xiaochan and leave first. I'll hold her off for a while." Facing the void trident in Xia Hongzhu's hand also burst out with dazzling brilliance. Xia Hongzhu seemed to have exerted all the power of this divine sense to attack. Seeing that the two of them were fighting, Han Fei was about to take Xia Xiaochan away. After all, his Void Mark could only be used 3 times. He had just become a disciple of the Void Temple, and he didn't want to use such a high-end power. The other kings weren't stupid. Even the sword god had retreated as soon as possible, and the others certainly ran away the moment they found something wrong. Only Luo Xiaobai and the others didn't run very far. If it weren't for Han Fei's shout, they might have tried to rescue her. Boom! Han Fei, who had just escaped, only had 1 foot in the void, and his body hadn't stabilized yet, when he was sucked back by the void vortex again. Because the possessed Huang Jingyuan didn't target anyone else but Xia Xiaochan. How could he let Han Fei take Xia Xiaochan away? Therefore, anyone could run, except for the two of them. Therefore, as soon as Han Fei appeared, a giant hole more than 6,000 kilometers wide appeared in the sky, and the void vortex dragged countless people and buildings in the god-sealing heaven into it. The core of the vortex turned out to be Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan. This was the result of Xia Hongzhu's all-out attack. At this moment, Xia Hongzhu's figure was illusory. It was obvious that her divine soul was on the verge of shattering. At this moment, Huang Jingyuan said slowly, "Xia Hongzhu, you're awake after all. Unfortunately, your current strength is too weak. Even if your main body is rushing over at full speed, you won't be able to catch up." Xia Hongzhu said coldly, "And Balan, if you dare to touch a single hair on my daughter's head today, I will definitely descend upon the ocean realm in the future and slaughter your entire family, leaving not a single one alive. Yes, let's talk about it when you can come." After that, a burst of fireworks shook the area within a radius of 10,000 kilometers into a void storm. Xia Hongzhu's soul disappeared in the void storm in the end. Seeing this, Xia Xiaochan's eyes turned red with extreme hatred. Han Fei didn't feel any hatred, but he was extremely angry. Not to mention that Xia Hongzhu would destroy the Yin family in the future. Han Fei would definitely go to the Yin family one day and make sure they didn't even have their underwear left. At this moment, he couldn't run away. But Han Fei saw a clue from the battle between Xia Hongzhu and this person. If this person really had the combat power of an emperor, Xia Hongzhu wouldn't have been able to resist her blow at all. Xia Hongzhu was a patient who hadn't recovered from her injuries, and this was only a wisp of her soul, but she could still block 2 attacks from this Imbalan. Obviously, Huang Jingyuan in the state of possession was not as strong as he had imagined. The reason why Han Fei was so sure was that he had just absorbed more than half of the chaotic qi and immortal spiritual qi in Huang Jingyuan's source. Even if the rest could maintain Huang Jingyuan's body to fight, how long could it maintain the combat power of an emperor? So, with a thought from Han Fei, a long scroll of formation maps flew out. Swish, 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 one wisp of fierce, immortal spiritual qi after another spurted out like divine demon swords from a box. There were 18 wisps of fierce, immortal spiritual qi at once. Originally, this was prepared to deal with Huang Jingyuan. Because the demon purification pot was very powerful, this second formation map was not used. But now, Han Fei had to take it out. Humph, seeing the wisps of fierce, immortal spiritual qi rushing towards Huang Jingyuan, the latter snorted contemptuously, waved his long sleeve, and directly absorbed all the void storms within a radius of 6,000 kilometers, turned them into a void spiral sword, and attacked Han Fei. Shoot! So strong? Although Han Fei felt that he was also very strong, the power that this guy burst out with a wave of his sleeve was completely beyond his understanding. Bam! 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 With continuous explosions, one wisp of fierce, immortal spiritual qi after another hit this terrifying spiral void sword. Although it had some effect, the effect was very small. He slashed 18 times in a row almost in an instant, but not even 50% of the power of this terrifying blow was weakened. Xia Xiaochan was horrified and hurriedly shouted, "Go! Find a way to leave and avenge me later." Han Fei said, "Don't panic. I think I can still fight." Xia Xiaochan was so anxious that she was speechless. "What do you mean you can still fight? What do you have to fight?" she shouted. "This is no longer Huang Jingyuan. This is a venerable emperor." Han Fei sneered. "What kind of venerable emperor is this? How can a venerable emperor be so weak?" At this time, a delicate crystal ball suddenly appeared in Han Fei's hand. Xia Xiaochan had seen this thing before. Wasn't this the small world that blocked the yin-yang heaven and the waterwood heaven before? Why did Han Fei have another one? The next moment, Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan's figures flashed and disappeared from this small world. This was a barren sea area, and only a few creatures lived here. When Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan appeared in this small world, Xia Xiaochan couldn't help but ask in surprise, Where did this small world come from? Can it block his attack?" Han Fei said, "Logically speaking, this person's strength is definitely stronger than Bei Luochun, but definitely not the strength of a venerable emperor. I guess he's just a wisp of his soul, just like your mother. Do you think the soul of a venerable emperor can definitely break such a small world?" Rumble, as soon as Han Fei said that, the small world turned from day to night, and the whole world was trembling. In the starry sky, it was as if huge stars were falling, and white marks appeared and disappeared one after another. Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan couldn't help but take a breath. This scene seemed to be the collapse of the world. Both of them were shocked at the same time. Is this the so-called power of a venerable emperor? This miraculous scene lasted for 13 breaths of time before a cracking and rumbling sound could be heard. Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan looked at each other. Sure enough, the upper limit of the power this small world could bear was limited. If it were only the heaven-opening state, it might take thousands of strikes to make a crack in this small world. However, Dizun Soul's psyche had split the small world in just a dozen breaths' time. At the 25th second, a second white crack appeared in the sky. At this moment, Both Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan could vaguely see the void turbulence that was still pouring crazily through the crack. Xia Xiaochan was so nervous that her hands were covered in sweat. If this small world can't stop it, you must find a way to escape as soon as possible. If I don't die, he won't stop. Han Fei shook his head. Come on, enter my origin sea. Xia Xiaochan shook her head. No, if I don't die, he won't let you go. Han Fei said, Do you think he will let me go if you die? Are you kidding? For a venerable emperor, you and I are just ants. Hurry up, or I will spank you. Don't talk nonsense at a time like this. Han Fei looked at Xia Xiaochan and said, Do you really think I came to attack the investiture of God's heaven without any preparation? Don't worry, I have a backup plan. At least it can keep me alive. As long as I don't die, with the heavenly awakening divine technique, do you think I can be killed? Xia Xiaochan was skeptical. Really? Gotcha. At this time, a third crack appeared in the sky. Han Fei estimated that this small world couldn't hold on for long, so he immediately said, Hurry up, don't make trouble. Although Xia Xiaochan didn't know what Han Fei could do, this time, just like when Han Fei was killed by Chen Huangdian, Han Fei should still have secrets. However, it was indeed not the time to ask too much. She'd better survive first. Therefore, Xia Xiaochan could only give up resistance and let Han Fei take her into the Origin Sea. When Xia Xiaochan entered the Origin Sea, she heard the old turtle say, Your 9-death soul-splitting octopus hasn't passed the tribulation yet. With its power, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to completely resurrect you now. Do you still have any secret trump cards? If not, I'm afraid we're really doomed this time. The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly. With a thought in his mind, Nian appeared next to him. As soon as Nian came out, she shouted, Brother Han Fei, why don't you let me fight? I can also fight. Han Fei grinned. Didn't I let you come out? However, you can't come out. Your mother has to do it. Chapter 2049. On the eve of attacking the investiture heaven, Han Fei stayed in the Mist Sea for 7 days. During those 7 days, Han Fei used almost all the resources he had on him to help Nian transcend the tribulation. Nian had been with him for decades, and when he took the Avenger to train in the chaotic sea, Nian never fell behind. In addition to the great path of time, Nian combat power was also quite good. Whether it was physique, soul power, or combat skills, she was not bad. On the previous trip to the Imperial Palace, Nian relied on the great path of time. Although she didn't touch a higher level of experience, she suffered a lot. In addition, Nian had lived in the time gap for so long, constantly devouring energy, so what Nian lacked was just experience. The time dragon carp didn't have time to take care of Nian, so it gave her to Han Fei. And after so many years, Nian had unknowingly become completely familiar with how to behave normally and could look at the world dialectically. This was growth. Therefore, he chose to let Nian transcend the tribulation before coming to the investiture heaven. But Han Fei wanted to take Nian on her last journey. The time dragon carp already knew about this. When Nian figure disappeared in the river of time, Han Fei looked up at the sky, across the world crack, and looked at the emperor who occupied Huang Jingyuan's body. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. This world, after holding on for a total of about 10 minutes, finally couldn't bear it anymore. The world collapsed, and the heavenly way collapsed. However, at the moment when this world collapsed, the terrifying void sword torrent was about to cut Han Fei. Han Fei's soul surrounded the void mark, ready to launch at any time. Fortunately, when the void sword torrent just pierced this world above the sky, the blue halo twisted, and the void sword torrent disappeared in an instant. The void here stabilized. Han Fei naturally understood that the void here had been reversed by someone and returned to what it should have been. From the Temple of Time, the void sword torrent that Embark had poured a lot of energy into was broken so easily, so he was naturally in a bad mood. He held a triangular divine seal in his hand and shouted in a low voice, Divine Talisman, break the barrier. The triangular divine seal continued to charge at Han Fei, but an extremely brilliant blue light appeared, and a big blue mouth spewed out a pillar of time, sucking the divine seal into it. The talisman charged forward for thousands of miles, but it eventually lost its strength. The talisman was corroded at a visible rate and turned into nothingness. However, the Pillar of Time did not stop. Instead, it enveloped Huang Jingyuan's body in one fell swoop. Huang Jingyuan's body was melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. And Balan said, "Regardless of whether you are from the Temple of Time or not, you have yet to attain immortality. Since you obstructed me, I'll kill that vile spawn today, so you'll have to accept my Emperor's seal." Bang! Huang Jingyuan's body suddenly exploded, and all his energy surged into a triangular divine seal. It was also at this moment that a shocking crack appeared in the sky. It was as if the heavens were bleeding. It was a terrifying scene. This was the first time a monarch had fallen in the chaotic Azure Sea. At this moment, everyone was moved. The moment the seal was condensed, a beautiful woman stood in front of Han Fei. Heavenly awakening divine technique, purify this seal. Hearing this, Han Fei was immediately refreshed. Heavenly enlightenment. The moment the light beam of the heavenly enlightenment divine technique enveloped the divine seal, a large amount of black smoke dissipated. Han Fei felt that his vitality had evaporated in an instant. 3,000 years. 4,000 years. 8,000 years. 12,000 years. Han Fei was shocked. If he hadn't seen the divine seal melting with his own eyes, he wouldn't have dared to block it. A mere divine seal eventually consumed Han Fei's vitality of 18,000 years. He hadn't even experienced such a great consumption when he broke into the imperial palace. Han Fei's face fell. He thought to himself, "What in family? Balan, how dare you consume my vitality? We're enemies now." It was not until the divine seal was purified that the time dragon carp breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that even she was afraid of it. Han Fei just heard from Balan that the time dragon carp was only at the heaven-opening state, not at the level of an emperor. Han Fei thought to himself, "It seems that I've guessed wrong." However, this also showed the power of the Great Way of Time. The terrible power that could blow up a small world was eliminated by the time dragon carp in the blink of an eye. Han Fei was envious of this kind of means. With a flash of blue light, Nian was dragged out of time by the time dragon carp. Nian asked, "Mom, is the fight over?" The time dragon carp said dotingly, "Yes, your brother is fine now. But this time Mom made a lot of noise. I'm afraid it will attract the enemy's attention. Nian, we have to go now." "Huh? But aren't we staying?" The time dragon carp said, "Nian, you have just completed some basic experiences. We are finally going to adapt to life in the River of Time. Next, Mom is going to take you to experience more terrifying experiences." Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. More terrifying experiences? In the River of Time, it seemed that there were enemies of the time dragon carp. Han Fei didn't know who this enemy was. Seeing that Nian was a little nervous, Han Fei couldn't help saying, "Nian, if you want to walk freely in time and reality, you definitely can't do it in the heaven-opening state. Your goal must be to achieve immortality. This is what I, including your mother, everyone is pursuing. Only by becoming strong could one not be bullied, could one live freely, and could one survive as one pleased in this world. In the first half, I will accompany you. In the second half, you have to accompany your mother." Nian naturally understood what Han Fei and her mother meant, but she felt happy to be with Han Fei. To be honest, after being trapped in the time gap for too long, Nian really didn't like the River of Time very much. However, reason told her that both Han Fei and her mother were doing this for her own good. So, Nian nodded heavily and then looked at her mother. "Can we come back and have a look?" The time dragon carp nodded. "Of course, but we need to complete the experience in the River of Time first." After comforting Nian, the time dragon carp said, "Han Fei, I really didn't expect that you have already begun to provoke an emperor-level powerhouse." Han Fei smiled bitterly, thinking to himself, "This is not what I want to provoke." The time dragon carp said, "Fortunately, this is just a soul. Otherwise, even I can only run away. Don't do this kind of thing rashly in the future. This time, I'm here, but next time I'm not sure." Han Fei cupped his hands. "Thank you for saving my life, Senior." The time dragon carp grunted and continued. By the way, how is your great Tao of time? Han Fei couldn't help but smile. Compared with little time, it's still a little worse. The time dragon carp said, of course. However, as you get stronger and stronger, you may be able to comprehend it more and more deeply. Remember what I said, don't step into the river of time rashly. In addition, there is one thing I want to tell you. In the future, if you really have to show the great Tao of time and are noticed by some people, remember not to enter the Temple of Time. Remember, do not enter the Temple of Time. Do not go to this place. It's a trap. Han Fei was puzzled. Wait, Senior, did you say the Temple of Time? The time dragon carp nodded slightly. Now that things have come to this, you can also understand some things. In addition to the masters of some big clans, there are also 3 super forces. You must be careful, that is, the 3 shrines. The time dragon carp seemed to be quite anxious. The 3 shrines are the Temple of Time, the Temple of Void, and the Temple of Undying. I don't know much about the Temple of Void and the Temple of Undying, but the Temple of Time is not a good thing. Many masters of the Time Dragon Carp clan have died in the Temple of Time. According to some other inherited memories, it seems that the Temple of Void and the Temple of Undying are not good things either. If you encounter them in the future, you must be careful. Okay, I have to go. This time, I can't stay for too long. Han Fei quickly recovered from his daze. Senior, have a safe journey. Nian, work hard to cultivate. Nianer shouted, Brother, I will come back to see you. Okay. Han Fei sent the time dragon carp and Nian away with a smile, but his face was slightly cold. What did the time dragon carp mean? He seemed to be very vigilant about the 3 shrines. If he guessed right, the danger that the time dragon carp mentioned should be related to the Temple of Time. If the Undying Shrine doesn't sound like a good place, then why isn't the Void Shrine good either? Unfortunately, the time dragon carp left in a hurry and didn't have time to ask. In fact, Han Fei didn't dare to ask just now. What if the time dragon carp got angry when it heard that he was from the Temple of Void? But in any case, the 3 shrines didn't seem to be simple. Even if the Temple of Void only had 12 people, it was not simple. Just look at eldest senior brother. He knew at a glance that he was definitely not simple. But now it was not his turn to care about this. In any case, he was also a member of the Temple of Void. Even if the Temple of Void had a bad reputation, they were quite nice to his family, and he had obtained a lot of resources and treasures. You have other allies? While Han Fei was thinking, he heard the sword god's voice. Looking back, the sword god's body condensed not far away. Chapter 2050. At this moment, Han Fei was standing outside the collapsed small world. Hearing the sword god's words, he immediately came back to his senses. Han Fei picked up the heavy small world and stuffed it into his origin sea. Seeing this scene, Sword God couldn't help but have a strange expression. It seems that you have obtained a lot of benefits in the Monarch Palace. This small world was the only one on the tree, and it was taken by your father. I didn't expect you to obtain another one. Han Fei smiled. I was just lucky. It's a pity that my small world was shattered within 10 minutes. The Sword God couldn't help but look at the seal of God's heaven that was surging with immortal spiritual energy. You actually withstood the attack of a supreme emperor. Oh no, you have a powerful ally who can withstand the attack of a supreme emperor. I didn't know about this. Han Fei said, that was my last trump card. He didn't know whether the Sword God believed him or not. He probably suspected that there was a hidden heaven creator in the chaotic ocean. The Sword God said, I didn't think you would really succeed. Anyway, you must have a lot of secrets. I won't ask more. I have to go. The Grand Pure Wuji must have taken action now. Of course, if they want to come here, I'm afraid they won't be here for a while. You have about 4 hours to plunder the resources of the seal of God's heaven. Han Fei cupped his hands. Senior, please go back. I will send the resources of the sword God heaven to you when I have sorted them out. Okay. The sword God turned into a sword light and disappeared between heaven and earth. And Han Fei's voice spread over 1,000,000 kilometers like waves. He shouted, the heaven creator is dead. The seal of God's heaven has collapsed. Return to your positions and gather the resources. What? Huang Jingyuan is dead? The palace masters of the lost immortal palace looked at the horrible scene in the sky and couldn't imagine it. Han Fei and the sword god worked together and really did it. It was the first time in the history of the chaotic ocean that someone had killed an emperor. In any case, Han Fei's name would be recorded in history, and he would become a legend. Chun Guangjia exclaimed, "He really did it. He killed an emperor. Doesn't this mean that Yin Yang Heaven will become one of the most powerful forces in the chaotic ocean?" Shui Ran sighed. "Fortunately, we didn't offend him." Zhou Chun replied, "We're considered allies." Xian Feng breathed a sigh of relief, but she was also shocked. She recalled the first time she met Han Fei. At that time, he was only at the Venerable Realm. It had only been a short while, but he had already killed an emperor. This was simply shocking news. Luo Xiaobai, Zhang Xuanyu, and the others rushed to Han Fei immediately. At this moment, Han Xian complained, "Why did 3 of them run away? But let them go." Of course, no one would admit to it. However, most of the original heavenly kings of Godseal had been surrounded and killed. What a joke. There were originally only 11 of them, and 5 of them had already died. Now, 3 of them had run away. It would be a miracle if the remaining 3 could survive against such a group of kings. Han Fei didn't care about this. He landed on the immortal palace, and with a thought, Xia Xiaochan appeared in the outside world. Xia Xiaochan was still nervously waiting for the situation outside, but she had already come out in such a short time. Since he could come out, it meant that he was safe. Xia Xiaochan was overjoyed and quickly looked to Han Fei. "Are you okay? How did you get through it? Where is that bastard from the infamily?" Hearing Xia Xiaochan's incessant questions, Han Fei smiled. "He's just a soul. It was blocked by Nian Er's mother." Nian Er's mother? Xia Xiaochan couldn't help but ask. "What is Nian Er's origin? You haven't told anyone about this." Han Fei felt that there seemed to be nothing to hide now. So he said, "She is a heaven-opening state expert who cultivates the great Tao of time. Because she always travels back and forth in time, she asked me to take care of her daughter for a few days." "Okay, don't worry about this. We have about 4 hours at most. Let's try to collect as many resources as possible here." Han Fei brushed it off, but he was thinking in his heart, "Why would Venerable Sovereign kill Xia Xiaochan? There must be some secret that I don't know, and I don't know if my mother-in-law knows." Then Han Fei took out the nautical panorama and took advantage of the last opportunity today to point at Huang Jingyuan's source again. Unfortunately, when Han Fei went in again, he found that it was so dark that he couldn't even see his fingers. The whole place was misty. Han Fei finally took out a few ultra-quality spiritual stones and found that the remaining spiritual energy in them was pitifully little. Son of a turtle. Sure enough, it was drained by that Balan. Who wants the residue? Just as Han Fei was about to leave, he suddenly found a creature outside this spiritual stone vein. Han Fei was taken aback. It turned out to be a weird half-human, half-fish creature. Han Fei stared at this strange man for a long time, only to hear the old turtle say, "There are many ways to open the sky, and some of them start with creating creatures. After opening the sky, people usually try to create some creatures. This varies from person to person. Obviously, this person tried to create a kind of creature in the source sea. But now they're all dead." Looking at the meridians of this strange man, Han Fei couldn't help but think of the seabed human race. When human beings first practiced the fish avatar technique, it was a long and complicated process. Countless people died in it, and this path was slowly becoming mature. Han Fei said, "Why does the heaven-opening state need to create creatures?" The old turtle said, "Can't you figure it out? Most of them want to try to create a more perfect race with higher potential. Then they either reincarnate or possess someone else. This kind of situation does exist, but most of them use this method when they can't go any further and feel that they can't go any further. Or the creatures they create are extremely perfect, but I don't think so. No matter how perfect they are, can they be more perfect than the Son of God?" The old turtle mumbled for a long time, and Han Fei understood what it meant. It was just creating creatures in his own source world, which was not a big deal. But the old turtle didn't think that the creatures he created would be very strong. He thought that any random son of God could kill all the creatures created by these people in seconds. In this regard, Han Fei reserved his opinion. The existence of the source, sea, was like creating a world. Since you can even create a world, what's the big deal about creating a few more creatures? Han Fei didn't stay long and quickly left the Huang Jingyuan source sea. This day was destined to be an extremely turbulent day in the chaotic ocean sea. At first, only kings died, which was actually not new in the chaotic ocean sea. There were so many strong masters in the chaotic ocean sea, and it was normal for a king to die occasionally. Generally, no one would investigate deeply. However, it was really rare for more than a dozen kings to die in a row. Even when exploring the imperial palace, there hadn't been so many deaths. Therefore, after Han Fei killed 7 kings in a row, the leaders of all the forces in the chaotic ocean sea were already paying attention and deducing. And when they saw the traces of the great Tao that looked like the opening of a heavenly river, the emperors all looked serious. This was no longer an ordinary event. That day, He Dao Yuan, King Wu, Xiao Hongzhu, Shi Pohuang, Kong Shun, and the others calculated the direction of the collapse of the great Tao of the emperor and arrived at the apotheosis heaven. Because the location of the apotheosis heaven was not too big secret. Even after the apotheosis heaven was sealed, it wouldn't move too far. It was just that the city protecting formation was activated, so it was difficult to find. But after the emperors roughly confirmed that it was the apotheosis heaven, everyone quickly arrived and quickly left. They came to confirm the current situation of the apotheosis heaven. As a result, when the emperors arrived, they all looked solemn. When they guessed that something had happened to Huang Jingyuan, they had already roughly guessed who was behind it. When they discovered that this place had almost been plundered, the entire main city had almost been destroyed by the void storm, and the thick blood qi had almost permeated the entire Godbane heaven. All the emperors thought to themselves that Han Fei was really too ruthless. He had directly destroyed the entire city. Almost on the same day, He Dao Yuan returned to the Grand Purity Palace and directly drafted a decree to the entire Grand Purity Palace. Anyone from the Grand Purity Palace who finds the traces of the Yin-Yang Heaven or the Waterwood Heaven will be awarded a sea-quelling bizarre treasure and accepted as a direct disciple of the Emperor. The Wuji Heaven, the 100 Demon Clan, the Seabed Human Clan, and all the other races almost followed the same routine and began to frantically search for the Yin-Yang Heaven. The bounty for finding the Yin-Yang Heaven in the martial Emperor City accumulated. For a while, all kinds of treasures were counted, and it was as many as 10 billion ultra-quality spirit stones. As soon as this news came out, the entire martial Emperor City went crazy. It could be said that the entire chaotic ocean sea was looking for the traces of the Yin-Yang Heaven and the Waterwood Heaven. As for Han Fei himself, he had been hiding in the Investiture Heaven. The emperors came and went, but none of them found Han Fei. He stayed for a few days and left calmly after plundering the source seas of the kings. 1 month later, the Yin-Yang Heaven. Han Fei frowned as he listened to Luo Xiaobai's summary of the total income of the Investiture Heaven this time. In total, plus those found from the bodies of the half-kings and the venerables, there were 134. 8 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones, including a large number of weapons. Han Fei plundered less than 68 billion from the treasury of the Investiture Heaven and the resources stored in the Immortal Palace. Han Fei wondered, that shouldn't be the case. Such a big Immortal Palace only has so little money? Luo Xiaobai took a breath and said, actually, it's not a small amount. It adds up to more than 200 billion. A large number of ordinary people mainly died in the Void Storm. The Investiture Heaven was destroyed. It's not bad that so many people survived. Han Fei scratched his head. Half of the Sword God's reward should be taken away. In addition, the kings of the other families are here. It's not right to give too little, and it's not enough if we give too much. Zhang Xuanyu asked. Sword God gave so much. Han Fei nodded. Of course it can't be less. Without the Sword God, we have no chance of winning this battle. I'll add 12 billion to my share and give 80 billion to the Sword God Heaven, no less. The rest, except for me, will be divided equally among the kings. Huh? Luren Kwang couldn't help saying, "No, Fei Fei. When did you become so generous? I risked my life to get it. Why shouldn't I take it?" Han Fei said leisurely, "You can give me all of it. Billions of them are nothing to me. I might as well give them all. After I cultivate in seclusion for a few days, let's go look for ultra-quality spiritual stone veins. I don't believe we can't find 17 or 18 ultra-quality spiritual stone veins in this vast sea area." In fact, Han Fei knew that he didn't suffer a loss this time. He had collected a large amount of chaotic energy and immortal spiritual energy, which were actually more valuable than these ultra-quality spiritual stones. As for the kings, they didn't have the money to work for them for free. It was fine if they did it once or twice, but they wouldn't be willing to do it again. After all, this time, he came to them half-blackmailed them, so he couldn't blackmail them all the time in the future. There were still the Grand Pure Wuji, the 100 Demons, and the Seabed Human Clan to fight. If he gave them more now, even if he threatened them in the future, they would be grateful to him for his generosity. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but smile. Han Fei's celestial navigation apparatus was indeed too powerful. He could easily find ultra-quality spiritual stone veins. Luo Xiaobai said, "By the way, Uncle Xian sent a message. Now the entire chaotic ocean is looking for us like crazy. I guess all the families are scared and want to find and kill you before you fully grow up." I've thought about it. Although this route has been abandoned for a long time, it has been cleared by us. If someone really comes, there is a certain chance that they will find this place. I wonder if we should enter the Mist Sea? Han Fei sneered. "No hurry. There are many strong masters in the chaotic ocean, but if they are not kings, a lot of them will die on the exploration road. What we should consider now is whether we should go to the 100 Demon tribe or the human tribe at the bottom of the sea, or should we go one by one?" Chapter 2051. Luo Xiaobai's worries were not unreasonable. Although Han Fei had opened up this abandoned route, it was also because of Han Fei's opening that the danger on this route was greatly reduced. If the entire chaotic ocean sea was dispatched, none of the routes controlled by the Martial Emperor's city could escape. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered. However, to search so many routes, it was impossible for all the king-level powerhouses to search. At most, it would be some venerable rel powerhouses. In this way, as long as one person was arranged to block the route, the time before the Yin-Yang Heaven was discovered could be greatly extended. After Han Fei gave the resources to the Sword God, on the way back, Han Fei directly summoned the old turtle. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, you have been cultivating for so long. It seems that it is still too difficult for Gue Sanqing to advance to the sea expansion realm with this body." The old turtle nodded. "This guy's level is indeed not high. It's a pity that Pang Jia has been killed by you. Otherwise, that guy's body would be not bad. However, I can't do possession too much. Every time I possess someone, I will fuse with the possessed to a certain extent. If I fuse too much, I will get lost. I'm not in a hurry now. Anyway, you will leave this place and go to the sea realm in the future. If you go there, you should be able to find my body. At that time, I can directly return to the heaven opening realm." This was something that Han Fei and the old turtle had long planned. The old turtle also said that he had a big gift for him. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, you will stay here and guard this route with Gue Sanqing's body. Intercept and kill all those who come." The old turtle said, "Now all the major forces in the chaotic ocean sea are guarding against you. It won't be easy for you to sneak attack them." Han Fei smiled. "Then let's wait for a while." Half a month later, Han Fei, Xia Xiaochan, Luo Xiaobai, Zhang Xuanyu, and Luren Kwang embarked on the treasure hunt again. The rest of them continued to stay in the Yin-Yang Heaven and the Waterwood Heaven to continue cultivating. After all, the Yin-Yang Heaven and the Waterwood Heaven hadn't been out for long and needed time to accumulate. Besides, during this period of time, it could be said that the Yin-Yang Heaven and the Waterwood Heaven were growing rapidly. Countless people cultivated day and night and had no time to explore the outside world. On the black ship in the sea of bewilderment fog, the five of them were eating hot pot when Zhang Xuanyu said, "The nautical panorama can only be used for a short period of time each time. It's difficult to accurately locate the target. So far, Whitefish has not found a large top-grade spirit stone mine. Shall we change our strategy?" Everyone looked at him, and Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Do you have a better way?" Zhang Xuanyu said, "Should we go to the sea region that the Grand Pure One and the others are in charge of? The Earth Meridian environment where the immortal palaces are located should not be bad, right? Will there be more top-grade spirit stone veins?" Xia Xiaochan rolled her eyes. "That's a bad idea. It's too risky." Lu Renquang asked, "Even if we find them, mining won't take a day or two. Can you guarantee that no experts will notice you?" Han Fei said, "The current speed is a bit slow, but we have more or less dug 5 or 6 small mines. Although on average, a top-grade spirit stone vein only contains tens of millions to 1 or 200 million top-grade spirit stones. But the frequency of finding top-grade spirit stone veins is very high." Han Fei couldn't help looking at Luo Xiaobai. "What do you think?" Luo Xiaobai shook her head slightly. "Let's find the first big mine first and see what happens." Another month passed. Han Fei and the others had dug more than 20 small veins one after another and dug a total of 8 billion top-grade spirit stones. This number was actually extremely shocking. When Han Fei first came to the Chaotic Sea, he didn't think of directly looking for spirit stone veins here. Otherwise, he would definitely have made a lot of money. But now if the 8 billion top-grade spirit stones were divided equally among the 5 of them, it was not bad for Zhang Xuanyu and the others because their origin sea was not large. Now, as long as they had time, they would concentrate on developing the origin sea. So if they maintained this rate of resource acquisition, it was completely acceptable for them in a short period of time. Besides, each of them had received nearly 5 billion top-grade spirit stones, which had already made their origin sea develop much faster. However, such a small amount of resources was not even enough for Han Fei. On this day, as usual, Han Fei quickly used the navigator 3 times and passed tens of thousands of kilometers in the mist sea at the fastest speed. According to the reaction of the navigator, Han Fei thought that he would find another small spirit stone vein this time. Therefore, after the 3 times of the navigator's pointing were used up, Han Fei lazily summoned Little Black and Little White. Han Fei said, "Daughter, look around and see if there are any ultra-quality spirit stone veins nearby." Little White seemed to be used to the recent routine, so after sensing for a while, she swam in a direction. However, after only swimming for an hour, he suddenly heard Little White say, "Dad, I feel a lot of spiritual energy. It seems to be very dangerous there." A lot of spiritual energy and very dangerous? Han Fei was shocked when he heard this. He hurriedly stepped on the cabin and shouted, "Come out, it's time to work." Lu Renquang poked his head out of the cabin. "Fei Fei, you found it again?" Zhang Xuanyu jumped out. "I was waiting for you to call me." When both Luo Xiaobai and Xia Xiaochan came out, Han Fei said, "We're back to work." "Work?" Han Fei grinned. "Let's go and have a look first. If I'm not mistaken, the ultra-quality spirit stone vein this time should not be small." As soon as he said this, everyone cheered up. Didn't they come here to find resources this time? Han Fei had just fought the gods in Vestiture Heaven. Although he won, he actually realized the real gap between his strength and that of the heaven-opening state. Not only Han Fei, but Luo Xiaobai and the others also felt the same. Therefore, including Han Fei, they actually didn't plan to do anything in the near future. That was why he took Luo Xiaobai and the others to look for resources. After a moment, in fact, there was no need for Whitey to lead the way. Everyone could already sense the density of the spiritual energy in this place. The density was twice that of the yin-yang sky. However, such rich spiritual energy was obviously abnormal, and Little White had just said that it was very dangerous here. When everyone was 100,000 kilometers away, Han Fei shouted, "Stop! There is danger here, but I haven't seen where the danger comes from." However, suddenly, everyone found that the seawater was moving and invisible waves suddenly surged towards them. Han Fei subconsciously felt that something was wrong. The surrounding seawater became sticky in an instant, as if it had turned into paste. Then, Han Fei and the others felt an abnormal wave slapping at them. Bam! Han Fei threw a backhand punch against the sticky seawater, and a terrifying blow comparable to that of the heaven-opening state burst out. Rumble! The seawater exploded, and some transparent jelly-like pieces of meat came at them. And around them, the pressure from the seawater was getting stronger and stronger. At this time, information emerged in Han Fei's eyes. Name Invisible Mother Introduction, a kind of transparent jellyfish that can completely turn into seawater, belonging to the Behemoth clan. It's difficult to detect their location when they are not in a battle. The Invisible Mother can turn into seawater, and by controlling the viscosity of the seawater, she can kill the enemy through pressure. Level 94 Quality Ancient Mutant Realm Sea Opening Realm contains chaotic gas greater than 8,655 wisps, combat skills, solidifying glue, bloodline reverse, extreme compression, collectible pressure water absorbable. Remarks it's best not to fall into the range of the Invisible Mother, or it will be difficult to escape. As soon as he saw this information, Han Fei was shocked. There were indeed all kinds of strange things in the world. He had observed for a long time, but didn't find any danger. It turned out that the real danger was this seawater. He looked at Zhang Xuanyu and the others, only to find that they were all coughing up blood. Even Han Fei himself felt that the essence blood in his body was flowing very slowly. However, they were also kings. How could they be beaten like this by a behemoth? Oh, besides Han Fei, Lu Renquang was the first to take action. A swallowing vortex appeared, and a large amount of seawater was swallowed by Lu Renquang crazily. Then, all kinds of demonic plants grew in this seawater. Although most of the demonic plants were crushed the moment they were born, there was still a large number of demonic plants that were not afraid of this squeezing force at all. For example, if you wanted to squeeze a piece of paper, how hard would you have to squeeze it to grind this paper into powder? Xia Xiaochan directly turned into a shadow, and only Zhang Xuanyu was still resisting with the power of his soul and his body. The Invisible Mother probably didn't expect that Han Fei and the others would be so difficult to deal with. With a flip of her hand, she was smashed into pieces by Han Fei and the others. After all, this Invisible Mother was only in the Pioneer Sea realm. How could Han Fei, who even dared to kill Sky Splitter, be afraid of it? Even Lu Renquang's swallowing power was too much for him to handle. The invisible, unfathomable matriarch wanted to use its ultimate suppressive power, but unfortunately, the only person it could suppress was Zhang Xuanyu. The other four didn't care. They attacked indiscriminately, and in a moment, the invisible, unfathomable matriarch exploded. Han Fei activated his yin-yang divine eyes, pointed his knife at a water area in the seawater, and said coldly, "You're courting death." However, before Han Fei's knife slashed down, he heard a crisp voice hurriedly. "Everyone, let's talk." Chapter 2052. The invisible, enigmatic mother thought that maybe she could defeat these people with the help of extreme compression. Even if she couldn't defeat them, she could still turn into seawater and disappear. However, she didn't know that Han Fei didn't take the usual path at all. He even knew where her soul origin was. She had never encountered such a situation before. At this time, there were 5 kings on the other side, so she definitely couldn't escape. Suddenly, a woman with mushroom hair emerged from the seawater. She waved her hand at them and said, "I didn't want to kill you. It was you who wanted to rob my spiritual stone mine. I wanted to protect my home, so I took action." The seawater in front of the woman with mushroom hair was rapidly compressing. She seemed to be afraid that Han Fei and the others would suddenly attack her. "Humph!" Lu Renquang snorted coldly. "So it's a woman. I was almost fooled by you. How can you just give me such an understatement?" Zhang Xuanyu held his spear and panted heavily. He said, "You almost killed me. No matter what you say today, I will definitely die." However, the woman with mushroom hair said, "Don't kill me. I am Water Toot Toot of the Behemoth clan. Let me go, and you can get the friendship of the Behemoth clan." Zhang Xuanyu said angrily, "Who do you think you are? Can you represent the Behemoth clan? Water Toot Toot said, I really can. With that said, a few pieces of water jade appeared in front of her, and she said, Our Behemoth clan has never been enemies with the other major forces in the chaotic Azure Sea. Look, this is a water jade secret treasure unique to Water Toot Toot. I have given the entire Behemoth clan a gift. This can be used as a shield and has the power of my shield. If you take this out, other behemoths will know that you know me, and they won't give you a hard time. Zhang Xuanyu was about to say something when Luo Xiaobai suddenly said, Do you mean that your Behemoth clan can contact each other? Water Toot Toot quickly shut up, seeming to realize that he had missed something. He heard that humans and other races were not friendly to the Behemoth clan. They coveted the bodies of the Behemoth clan every day and used them to refine various weapons. He must never reveal the secret of the Behemoth clan. Hearing Luo Xiaobai's question, Han Fei suddenly had an idea. According to his contact with the almighty beasts, he felt that these almighty beasts were indeed an alien group that he could make friends with. Although the giant toad he had met in the Imperial Palace was also a clever toad, the people from the giant beast lineage were the ones who hadn't caused any trouble the entire time. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, Watery Doodle, right? Yes, yes. Shuedu nodded repeatedly and humbled herself, only hoping that Han Fei and the others would let her go. Han Fei said, We'll take your water jade too. We want this supreme grade spirit stone vein as well. Water Toot Toot hurriedly said, Here, here, I'll go find something else. Han Fei smiled and said, We are not bloodthirsty people. Are you interested in helping us contact the heaven-opening stage powerhouses of the Almighty Beast clan? Toot Toot was stunned. Why were these people looking for the heaven-opening Titanic Beast? Could it be that they were plotting something? But that was a heaven-opening behemoth. She didn't believe that anyone in the chaotic vast sea could shake a heaven-opening stage beast, even if it was a heaven-opening stage powerhouse from the major forces. In the Almighty Beast clan, how could ordinary people compare to those who could cultivate to the heaven-opening stage? However, Shui Tuda didn't dare to agree. After all, the Almighty Beast clan was strictly prohibited from interacting with the major races. Whether it was humans, the 100 Demon clan, the Seabed Human clan, or the Mermaid Royal clan, they were all prohibited from interacting with each other. In the past, there had been many examples of almighty beasts interacting with humans in history, but the final outcome seemed to be not very good. Shui Tudu said, I can only ask. Han Fei and Luo Xiaobai looked at each other. Sure enough, the Almighty Beast clan had a heaven-opening stage powerhouse. Secondly, the Almighty Beast clan also seemed to have a nest. This nest could allow them to contact the powerhouses of the same Almighty Beast clan. Luo Xiaobai said, Let her go. Han Fei understood and smiled faintly. Shui Tudu, you can remember my name. My name is Han Fei, the master of the Yin-Yang heaven. In the future, I will unify the 36 profound heavens of the human race. You can tell your heaven-opening stage powerhouse of the Almighty Beast clan my deity, whether he is willing to come to see me or not. I hope you can help me convey this message. Shui Tudu was taken aback. The master of the Yin-Yang heaven? I seem to have heard of it, but I don't know. I forgot. But she was overjoyed that she could survive. With a splash, Shui Tudu turned into seawater and quickly disappeared. She said, I will help you convey your message. As for whether the heaven-opening behemoth is willing to see you or not, I don't know. Shui Tudu slipped away quickly. When she completely disappeared from everyone's perception, Zhang Xuanyu wondered, Why did you let her go? She is a sea-opening stage powerhouse. She should have a lot of resources, right? Xia Xiaochan wondered, Are we going to unite with the Almighty Beast clan? Han Fei said, I won't know until I see her. Anyway, in our current situation, it's not suitable to offend the last major force in the chaotic ocean. In that case, we will almost become enemies with the entire chaotic ocean. Luo Xiaobai nodded. I think so too. It's not appropriate for us to provoke the Almighty Beast clan again. The main reason is that this clan can move freely in the chaotic ocean and is extremely mysterious. It's not good for us to offend them, but if we can unite with them, we will have one more powerful ally although this is unlikely. Han Fei nodded. The almighty Beast clan has been in the chaotic ocean for tens of thousands of years and has never allied with any force. I guess it's impossible. However, Han Fei was also puzzled. Old Han and the king crab had become good friends since they were children. Was this an alliance? But in any case, they had seized a huge mineral vein this time. Han Fei said, "Hurry up, mine." Han Fei summoned the nine-tailed mantis shrimp. Luo Xiaobai and the others used different methods. Luo Xiaobai loosened the soil and let Lu Rinquang absorb the energy, while Zhang Xuanyu and Xia Xiaochan collected the ultra-quality spiritual stones in the mineral vein. While they were operating, Lu Rinquang wondered, why does the almighty Beast clan occupy such a large mineral vein but not collect the entire mineral vein itself? Zhang Xuanyu shrugged. Who knows? Anyway, we can make a fortune from it. However, Xia Xiaochan said, I know this, because the birthplace of the ultra-quality spiritual stone mines will also absorb spiritual energy from all directions, which is much more useful than the spirit-gathering formation. The mermaids and mermaids have some mineral veins. As long as they use them properly, they will grow and multiply endlessly, and they can use them for many years. If they cut off the earth veins here, the ultra-quality spiritual stone mines can't continue to expand. Hearing this, everyone immediately understood. Luo Xiaobai said, Then why didn't you mention the mineral vein I found in the seaborne grassland last time? Xia Xiaochan said, How long will it take for us to devour spiritual energy? This water toot was enjoying such a large best-grade spirit stone vein all by itself. She doesn't care about time. She has been absorbing spiritual energy for thousands of years. If she can absorb twice the resources of an ultra-quality spiritual stone mine, why not? But there are so many of us. It won't be enough. Hearing this, everyone immediately understood. Han Fei said, We don't have the time to wait for an ultra-quality spiritual stone mine to grow. Anyway, the chaotic sea is very big. It won't affect us at all, even if we have 8 or 10 spiritual stone mines. 6 days later, Han Fei and the others dug the spiritual stone mine clean, and Luo Xiaobai even extracted an earth vein, obtaining a total of 8 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones. Such a huge mineral vein stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers and was as deep as 100 kilometers. Fortunately, they were all in the Pioneer Sea realm. If it were venerable, it would take him a long time to dig. Han Fei had planned to divide up this batch of ultra-quality spiritual stones equally, but now he didn't have enough spiritual stones. However, Han Fei had almost emptied his pocket in the battle of the investiture god Heaven. So this time, only one of them took 1 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones and gave the rest to Han Fei. Luo Xiaobai said, Our origin sea is still small and needs a lot of time to develop. Now, even if it is full of resources, we can't use it all. Zhang Xuanyu also said, Besides, no matter how many resources we have, we still need enough chaotic qi. Now the amount of chaotic qi is limited. Even if you give us all these resources, we still have to digest them. Han Fei agreed. In fact, Zhang Xuanyu and the others were much better than he was. Where did he get billions of ultra-quality spiritual stones in the past? Now, they were all worth tens of billions of ultra-quality spiritual stones. These resources were enough to pave the origin sea with a radius of 30,000 kilometers. Han Fei nodded. Okay, then the rest is mine. Anyway, when the time comes, we will take over the 100 Demons clan and the Seabed Human clan. There are endless resources waiting for us. After distributing the ultra-quality spiritual stones, Lu Rinquang said, These days, no one from the giant beast clan came. Is it because they are too far away? Han Fei nodded. It's normal that they don't come. Anyway, it doesn't matter whether they come or not. We don't have the foundation to cooperate with the giant beast clan, so we just have to give it a try. Anyway, we won't lose anything. Let's continue to look for resources. Wait a minute. However, Luo Xiaobai said, Try to find only the giant beast clan. If a giant beast like Water Toot likes to occupy a mineral vein for cultivation, will other giant beasts do the same? Chapter 2053. Luo Xiaobai's idea was refreshing. It was a good idea. In this mist sea, there were too many mineral veins. It could be said that thousands of mineral veins of various colors could be found within 100,000 kilometers of the sea. In fact, a mineral vein of hundreds of millions of ultra-quality spiritual stones was already not small. If there were no nautical phenomena instrument, how could they excavate in the depths of the sea? However, there must be people who specialized in finding ultra-quality spiritual stone mineral veins. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many ultra-quality spiritual stones in the chaotic ocean sea. However, Han Fei felt that the method Luo Xiaobai proposed might be something that no one had tried before. First of all, the giant beast race was mysterious to begin with. They traveled through the chaotic azure sea and rarely showed themselves. Other than when opening up new routes, there was a chance of encountering them. Most of the time, whether it was the human race, the hunter-demon race, or the human race at the bottom of the sea, it was very difficult to encounter the giant beast race. With Luo Xiaobai's proposal, it only took them 4 days to find a second giant beast in a sea of flowers at the bottom of the sea. When they first arrived at this sea of flowers, they felt that it was also a place full of spiritual energy, but it only covered a range of 1.5 million kilometers. After they went deeper for more than 10 minutes, they encountered a large area of poisonous fog. This poison was a great threat, even to pioneer sea realm cultivators. However, it was almost impossible to force Han Fei and so many other kings to retreat with just a poisonous fog. Even if it wasn't Han Fei's team, any random group of people who found such a strange place wouldn't be easily fooled. Seeing that Han Fei and the others refused to leave, a strange demonic vine stretched out from under this sea of flowers. It also tried to attack Han Fei and the others, from illusion attacks to attacks combining illusions and entities. Unfortunately, this demonic plant didn't expect Han Fei to be so strong. When Han Fei found the right location, penetrated the veins of the earth, and found her body within 10 minutes, she was dumbfounded. The flower spirit was suppressed by Han Fei's powerful force at this moment, and her eyes were full of resentment. She shouted, "Human beings don't even think about getting the slightest benefit from me. I'll blow myself up." However, Han Fei took out a water jade casually and said, "Do you know this? Dudu? What did you do to Dudu? Let me tell you, if you provoke the behemoth bloodline too much, the heaven-splitting behemoth bloodline will come looking for you." Han Fei smiled faintly. "Me? This is a gift from Water Toot Toot. Impossible. Dudu has never had any human friends." Han Fei shrugged. "If you don't believe me, ask her yourself. By the way, help me pass a message to your heaven-opening behemoth. Tell him that the human sovereign Han Fei has something to discuss with him. As for how to find me, that will depend on luck. I stayed for 7 days each time." "All right, you can go now." Hua Ling was confused. "You let me go? What else can I do? Do you want me to chop you up and use you to refine a rare treasure?" 3 days later, Zhang Xuanyu. 8 billion, a lot less than last time, but fortunately our speed of finding resources is too fast. Fei, you take 5 billion and we'll split the rest. TSK, if this goes on, it won't be long before we become rich. Lu Renquang asked, "If the heaven-opening behemoth comes, can we still rob them in the future?" "Then we can't rob them anymore. Let's cooperate with the behemoth bloodline. Otherwise, why would they cooperate with us? I just don't know if we should return them." Han Fei immediately said, "It's still impossible. How can we return the resources that we've already got?" 7 days later, Han Fei still didn't see the heaven-opening behemoth coming, so he began to look for the next beast. This time, it took him a little longer. It took him 8 days, and he almost crossed the fog sea. This time, Han Fei found a 6-color dragon snake, which was a descendant of the dragon clan. After looting 2 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones, Han Fei released the snake again. After another 7 days, Han Fei saw that no one came, but it didn't matter. Anyway, as long as the heaven-opening behemoth didn't come, they could rob more resources. For the 4th time, Han Fei spent 5 days and finally found a toad in a desert area in the Fog Sea. Yes, it was the toad behemoth. When Han Fei saw the toad behemoth, it opened its mouth, stuck out its huge tongue, rolled up a huge sandworm, and dragged it into its mouth. Han Fei was stunned. The chaotic sea was so big, but he didn't expect to find an old acquaintance so quickly. However, this time, Han Fei didn't feel how rich the spiritual energy here was. The moment Han Fei appeared, the toad behemoth said to him via voice transmission, "Brother, I've finally found you. I really admire you. No matter how far away you are, you can find people of the behemoth bloodline in just a few days. You really scared many kings of the behemoth bloodline." When Han Fei and the others appeared in front of the toad behemoth was smiling and talking to Han Fei with its two super big eyes. Xiao Xiaochan looked at Han Fei. "Do you know each other?" Han Fei replied, "We traveled together for a while in the Imperial Palace." Han Fei said, "Oh, it's you, Brother Toad. It seems that you have been waiting for us." The toad behemoth smiled. "Yes, I was waiting for you. I'll let you know that the heaven-opening behemoth of my behemoth lineage told you to run slower. He was slow and couldn't catch up to you even after rushing over several times." Huh? Han Fei and the others looked at each other. What did this mean? Did the heaven-opening behemoth come to find them? Han Fei was speechless. "He came to find us." The toad behemoth said, "You destroyed the nests of several behemoths in a row and dug several ultra-quality spiritual stone mines. The heaven-opening behemoth naturally knew that you had a way to find us. But he is a behemoth that can't run fast. Every time he rushed over, you would have been gone for 2 or 3 days. So Jiao Jiao, Water Toot Toot, and Hualing scattered and waited for you to find us." Han Fei was dumbfounded. Is the heaven-opening behemoth so slow? The toad behemoth said, "It's not the heaven-opening behemoth that is slow, but the heaven-opening behemoth. Don't go. I'll call the heaven-opening behemoth over." The toad behemoth took out a big conch, blew on it for a long time, and then slowly put it away. "Brother Han, I heard that you killed an emperor warrior. Why are you still thinking about us behemoths now?" The big toad had been entrusted with a heavy responsibility and was waiting here for Han Fei. His heart was beating like a drum. What if this bloodthirsty person killed him? If Han Fei hadn't let Water Toot Toot and Hua Ling return, the toad might not have dared to come. Han Fei glanced at it. "Why? Do you behemoths also care about current affairs?" The toad said, "It's mainly because you made too much noise. Since you can already kill an emperor warrior, why do you still want to find us? Our almighty beast bloodline has never stirred up trouble. It's a win-win cooperation. Forget it. Let's talk about it when the heaven-opening behemoth comes." Although the toad had a lot of questions to ask, it didn't want to provoke Han Fei, who could even kill an emperor warrior. So, the 5 of them watched the toad eat clam silkworms for 10 days in a row. Luren Kwong said via voice transmission, "These clam silkworms are all idiots. They know there is a toad, but they still come out for no reason. Are they stupid?" Luo Xiaobai said, "It's not that they want to come out, but the place where the clam silkworms are is sealed. They will die whether they come out or not." Luren Kwong sighed. "These clam silkworms are so pitiful." Han Fei sneered. "Pitiful? They're all splitting the little clam silkworms down there. They just come out to feed them, hoping that the toad will leave as soon as it is full." While Han Fei and the others were chatting, they heard an old voice from far away. "I'm exhausted. Human, since you can find a behemoth, why don't you go to me directly? Why do you want me to come to you? Don't you know how to respect the old and cherish the young?" Han Fei and the others scanned the area with their perception, but saw nothing. Even Han Fei scanned the area again and again, but he didn't see anything. After more than 10 minutes, Han Fei looked 2 million kilometers away and saw a super big snail with a giant shell on its back moving slowly close. Beside the snail, Water Toot Toot and the flower spirit were sitting on its shell. Water Toot Toot made the seawater smooth, making it convenient for the snail to move forward. The flower spirit summoned giant vines and dragged the snail to run wildly. The seawater 100 kilometers deep couldn't even cover half of the snail's eyeball. Its body length was more than 800 kilometers, which made Han Fei and the others dumbfounded. Isn't this 2F asterisk king big? The snail's shell was almost as tall as the sky. Han Fei was speechless. This emperor's speed is probably not even as fast as that of an ordinary Pioneer Sea realm cultivator. Besides, do you have to come with such a huge body? You shouldn't be like this even if you transform into a human, right? Most importantly, Han Fei couldn't understand when a snail became a big shot in the sea. Whoosh! When it was still 1,000,000 kilometers away from Han Fei, the big snail finally transformed into a human. It turned into a hunchbacked old man with a large arc-shaped shell on his back. His eyes, eyebrows, and beard were all white. Holding a cane in his hand, he glared at Han Fei fiercely. "What are you looking at? Do you have a conscience to make an old man like me walk so far?" Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, "Senior, you're already in the Pioneer Sea realm. Why are you so slow?" "Slow?" The old man snorted. "I'm slow. I'm already the fastest snail in history. If I dare to be fast, the void here will collapse, and the great Tao here will think that I'm an alien and will chop me. Do you still think I'm slow?" Han Fei. Chapter 2054. It was the first time that Han Fei had heard that an emperor would have such a big entourage. Even Xiao Hongzhu and the others aren't as exaggerated as you, who can collapse the void just by running. "You're just bragging," Han Fei said. "Senior, but no matter what, we've finally met. In fact, I want to talk to you about a win-win situation." However, when Han Fei was about to say something, he heard the old snail say, "I know you." Although the giant beast bloodline doesn't usually pay much attention to the chaotic vast ocean, this emperor still knows that you killed a monarch. As he spoke, the snail was already 100,000 kilometers away from Han Fei. Han Fei reminded them, "Relax your mind and be ready to enter my source world at any time." "Kid, how can the giant beast clan have any bad intentions? You came to me, but now you're so scared." Han Fei didn't care that the old snail heard his voice transmission. He just grinned. "After all, you're at the heaven opening realm. If you really attack us, we can only run away. Why don't we talk there?" The old snail stopped and propped himself on the ground with his cane. "I know what you're trying to do. The chaotic ocean has 5 major forces: the human race, the 100 demon race, the seabed human race, the mermaid royal family, and the giant beast clan. We, the almighty beasts, have never participated in your battles. You just killed an emperor a few days ago. Now that you've come to me, it's obvious that the other forces are tempted but feel that they're not strong enough, so they're targeting the giant beast clan. How can I not know what you're thinking?" Han Fei thought that the old snail was very shrewd, but he didn't disagree. He said, "Senior, let's not beat around the bush. I just want to cooperate with the giant beast clan. Look, except for the extremely aggressive races such as the 100 demon race and the seabed human race, the giant beast clan has almost no natural enemies in the chaotic ocean. Although the chaotic ocean is huge, if we can wipe out these 2 forces, I, Han Fei, on behalf of the human race, will never make things difficult for the giant beast clan. In this way, the giant beast clan will really have no natural enemies?" The old snail sneered. "Why? If you can't beat it yourself, why should the almighty beast bloodline help you?" Han Fei didn't take the old snail's words seriously. If the old snail was strong, he could do whatever he wanted. He said, "It's simple. Take down these 2 clans, and we'll split the resources equally. How about it?" Han Fei smiled and said, "I slaughtered the god Seal Heaven and obtained nearly 300 billion ultra-quality spiritual stones. And this was only the Godbane Heaven. If a superpower like the 100 demon race was destroyed, their resources would only be 10 times, or even tens of times greater than the God Sealing Heaven. Don't you think it's better to split the resources in half?" Hiss, Luo Xiaobai and the others glanced at Han Fei, wondering how the investiture of God's Heaven had 300 billion resources. It seemed that Han Fei was going to brag again. Sure enough, the toad behemoth, water toot, flower spirit, 7-color dragon snake, and other giant beasts were all shocked. According to what Han Fei said, there were indeed a lot of resources. 3 trillion resources. Oh my God! These behemoths felt that they couldn't even begin to calculate this amount. Even the old snail was slightly startled, thinking to himself, is there such a thing? Wouldn't the two clans add up to 10 trillion? Only Luo Xiaobai and the others knew that it was Han Fei who had exaggerated 200 billion resources into 10 trillion deja vu. To be honest, even they were tempted by this number. However, this old snail had seen the world and wouldn't be so easily intimidated by Han Fei's words. He said, "Kid, it's easy for you to say. The 100 demon race and the human race at the bottom of the sea all have heaven-opening realms. Although none of them can shake this old man. This old man isn't too proficient in combat. Furthermore, their two clans are one, and they have quite a few kings. If you want to exterminate them just like that, why did you come looking for this old man? Furthermore, although my almighty beast bloodline values resources, it's not like we can't understand the situation here. It's impossible to use my giant beast bloodline as a tool." Han Fei's expression didn't change. No matter what the old snail said, the performance of the toad behemoth and water tutu just now had already betrayed them. Obviously, they really needed resources. They were definitely not as calm as the old snail said. Han Fei said, "Senior, you can't say that. How can I use you as a weapon? We are cooperating for a win-win situation. We are still the main contributors. Look at Investiture Heaven. I didn't come to you to cooperate, did I? Didn't I settle it too? Of course, I also admit that I found the Sword God to cooperate with. However, doesn't this mean that the strength on my side is not weak? If I, the Sword God, and you, Senior, that's equivalent to 3 emperors. If the Beast Kings are dispatched, I can have as many as 30 Beast Kings on my side. Is this strength weak?" The old snail pondered for a moment. Whether Han Fei was opportunistic or not, it was a fact that he killed Huang Jinyuan. However, it was still not feasible to trick them into fighting the 100 demon race and the human race at the bottom of the sea. It was not easy to cultivate the Beast Clan. Although they were big, they were few in number. Besides, in the same realm, size didn't mean anything. As for the 100 Demons clan and the Seabed Human clan, they had survived in the outer sea for so many years. If they were so easy to defeat, the human emperors of the inner domain would have killed them long ago. Han Fei wouldn't have had the chance to kill them now. So, the old snail continued to shake his head. "No. How do you know the real trump cards of the 100 demon race and the human race at the bottom of the sea? What if they have hidden heaven-opening realms? No matter how many beast kings go, they won't be able to defeat them." Han Fei spread his hands. "Me? By the way, Senior, do you want to leave the chaotic Azure Sea? You should know about the Human King's eastward journey and the War Queen's cross-border journey, right?" The old snail nodded. "Of course I do. But these two didn't end well. There was no news from the Human King, and he never returned. The War Queen came back, but she has been sleeping ever since, which shows how dangerous the outside world is. We, the Beast Clan, have a long life. It will be easy for us to live for hundreds of thousands of years. Why should we go to the outside world to seek death?" Han Fei was speechless. This old snail was a bit stubborn. They were not interested in going out and could resist the temptation of resources. Then what else could attract them? Han Fei believed that every race had its own aspirations. The ultimate goal of all creatures was nothing more than to open the sea and the sky and achieve immortality. The beasts, of course, cultivated for the same goal. When he first met the king crab, he knew that the beasts were constantly transforming. However, every time they transformed, they would grow larger. Han Fei couldn't help but murmur, to maintain such a large size, they should need a lot of resources. The amount of energy they absorbed every day should be an astronomical figure. How could they resist the temptation of resources? If he were a beast, he might be the most aggressive in the chaotic Azure Sea. He would have launched a battle and wiped out the 100 demon race. How could he be indifferent to so many resources? Unless they had their own accumulation of resources and had the confidence to resist the temptation of so many resources. Also, opportunities like ultra-quality spiritual stones were actually not enough to tempt them. Did they need more advanced resources? Suddenly, Han Fei thought of something, right? The growth of the beast was a process of constant evolution and transformation. Han Fei couldn't help but say, "Senior, If an emperor dies, their immortal spiritual energy will be provided to the beasts. How about that? The old snail's eyes flickered. He looked at Han Fei for a while and said leisurely, "Are you willing to do that? That's immortal spiritual energy." Han Fei grinned. "Once I open the sky, I can produce immortal spiritual energy myself. What's there to be reluctant about?" The old snail said leisurely, "However, let's not talk about whether it's difficult to kill an emperor or not. How much immortal spiritual energy can they accumulate?" Han Fei said with a smile, "Senior, maybe an emperor doesn't have much immortal spiritual energy, but the resources in the chaotic Azure Sea are limited. How can they support the beast kings to open the sky? The outside world is rich in resources, but it's a bit dangerous. How can it be so easy to achieve immortality without going through danger?" Toad, Water Doodle, Hua Ling, and the others all looked at the old snail. To be honest, they were tempted. The beasts needed too many resources. Although they could travel through the Mist Sea, they could only reach the peak stage of the sea expansion realm with the spiritual stone mines alone. It would be very difficult to go further. Toad said something to the old snail, and the old snail suddenly said, "Han Fei, right? Well, don't you have a way to find the way? You can come alone to the place of origin of the beast bloodline to find me. If you can help me solve a problem, I'll cooperate with you." Luo Xiaobai and the others all looked at Han Fei. "You couldn't go alone, right? What if it was a trap?" Han Fei said generously, "Okay, it's a deal." Xiao Xiaochan immediately pulled Han Fei. "What do you mean by okay? Aren't you a bit too casual?" Luo Xiaobai also said, "Don't be impulsive. We don't have to cooperate with the beasts." Han Fei said to everyone via voice transmission, "It doesn't matter. In the chaotic Azure Sea, even if it's a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, I can still go there. What can the beasts do to me?" Han Fei said, "Senior, how long will I be gone?" The old snail said, "That depends on when you can solve that problem. If you can't, you can leave at any time. If you are afraid, I can't do anything about it. That problem can only be solved in the land of origin of the almighty beasts." Chapter 2055. 3 days later, on the edge of the Mist Sea, on the way back to the Yin-Yang Heaven, Luo Xiaobai said, "From a rational point of view, I think this trip is very dangerous. The behemoths don't care about anything, but they care about a mysterious problem. Besides, why does he want you to solve it? How does he know you can solve it?" Xiao Xiaochan nodded. "Yes, there must be something wrong with that old man. He's not trustworthy." Zhang Xuanyu said, "Fei Fei, you are strong, but the Sky Creator Behemoth can't be weak either. Listen to what he said. If you run faster, the void will collapse. This old man's strength may be too strong. If he really has any thoughts about you, such as taking over your body, what can you do?" Han Fei sneered. "It's impossible for him to possess me. Once he does, he will die." Luren Kuang asked, "What if he wants to eat you?" Han Fei said angrily, "Do you think it's always you? You want to eat everything you see?" Han Fei said, "I've made up my mind. I've found some clues after cultivating to my current level. It's very difficult for me to improve my strength further. Even if I have another 10,000 years, I can only improve by 20% at most. Even so, when the time comes, I can barely fight against someone at the Sky Creator Realm. It's still very difficult to defeat the Grand Pure Wuji and the 100 Demons. Now that I can find allies, why not? Besides, if I kill the emperors as soon as possible, I can also get more resources from the Source Sea, where they died, and accelerate my cultivation. So I must go on this trip." Seeing Han Fei's determined attitude, everyone knew that it was useless to say anything. Luo Xiaobai said, "Since you have made up your mind, we will go back to the Yin-Yang Heaven to wait for you. But if something goes wrong, you must leave immediately or find a way to inform us. Don't worry. Once there is no danger there, I will contact you as soon as possible." After bidding farewell to Luo Xiaobai and the others, Han Fei didn't hesitate at all and directly controlled the navigator to the place of origin of the behemoth. As he said, if he wanted to become stronger, he couldn't wait passively or grow slowly by looking for resources. In the investiture heaven, he went to Huang Jingyuan's origin sea and forcibly absorbed more than 20,000 wisps of immortal spiritual energy by refining demons. However, after he refined this immortal chi, it only increased his strength by less than 5%. However, it could increase the strength of the origin sea to a whole new level, and it could even expand the origin sea. The old turtle had said that immortal chi was a high-level energy that could only be used after the heaven-opening realm. Although it could be used now, its greatest use was to open up the origin sea. Because immortal chi was extremely rare, he only needed about 10 strands to create one strand of baleful immortal chi. These 20,000 strands of baleful immortal chi would be enough for him to create 2,000 strands of baleful immortal chi. So Han Fei didn't dare to use it. But when he thought of the evolution method of the behemoths, he had the idea of consuming all the immortal spiritual energy. He was wondering if the origin sea created from the immortal chi would be better than the one created from the spirit chi. However, Han Fei wasn't in a hurry to do that. Opening up the origin sea was easy, but filling it was difficult. He'd better go to the place of origin of the ultralisks first. 17 days later, Han Fei was quite shocked. If he really wanted to pass through the mist sea at full speed, it would only take him 1 day, but it took him 17 days to go around and around, and the nautical panorama was still pointing at him like it was the real thing. As early as the 10th day, Han Fei found something wrong. Even if some places couldn't be accurately located, it shouldn't be like this. When he looked for other ultralisks, it only took him a few days to accurately locate them. But it took him so long to reach the place of origin of the ultralisks. Until today, when Han Fei made marks along the way, he found that he had been circling around a place with a length of more than 500,000 kilometers. There seemed to be something wrong with the space here. Once he entered this area, he seemed to immediately come out of this area. It was not a problem with the nautical panorama. However, the fog sea didn't block perception. But the result of his perception was not a problem. Everything seemed to be like a normal sea, and he could easily see through this 500,000 kilometers of sea. Is the space here so weird? Han Fei couldn't help but smile faintly. It seemed that the snail was also testing him. It was probably trying to tell him that if he couldn't even find this place, he wouldn't be able to leave the chaotic sea. How could Han Fei admit defeat? Since there was something wrong with this space, he just needed to find out where the problem was. This time, when the navigator rotated again, it was different from when it foolishly rushed in. The nautical panorama was just turning gently and slowly. Although the range was not large, it had been continuously turning. This made Han Fei realize that this so-called space was changing at any time. This point was not the way to the place of origin. The place of origin was there. Han Fei should have been there countless times, but the two didn't belong to the same space, so it was meaningless for him to go there. It was a pity that during the rotation of the nautical panorama, Han Fei broke through the void several times, but failed to open the entrance to the place of origin. Therefore, Han Fei could only restart it. He repeated this 3 times, but still didn't find a way to enter the place of origin. However, he found that what was rotating with a nautical panorama was the fog here. Han Fei couldn't help but wonder. It was difficult to tell the direction in the chaotic sea. Then what was the point of the sea of fog? Was it to separate the inner area and the outer area? Han Fei seemed to have discovered some secret. Was the existence of the sea of fog related to the place of origin? Although he didn't have the pointing function of the nautical panorama, Han Fei observed the turning of this weapon. In the end, he found that this fog would pause 6 times a day, and when it paused, part of the fog would reverse. In the end, Han Fei found that the fog paused 6 times a day, each time for less than 1 breath. After each pause, a piece of fog seemed to disperse, but in fact, it was spreading in the opposite direction. When Han Fei retreated 500,000 kilometers to observe this weapon again, he could no longer find the phenomenon of the weapon pausing, nor could he find the phenomenon of the fog reversing. Han Fei couldn't help but feel refreshed, because 1 breath was really too short. The further away he was from the place of origin, the more the movement of the fog would disappear because of the distance. Sure enough, this is the center of the sea of fog, the so-called place of origin. The next day, Han Fei didn't rush to use the nautical panorama. Instead, he first performed the Gemini divine technique and didn't break through the void until the fog paused for the first time. This time, a hole appeared in the void and directly sucked Han Fei in. As soon as Han Fei entered, he found a completely different sea area. First of all, when Han Fei scanned with his senses, he found that the environment here almost included undersea forests, sand seas, seaborne prairies, undersea volcanoes, coral reefs, salt seas, mineral veins, desert in the sea, abyssal chasms, and countless other strange undersea landforms. As Han Fei spread out his perception, nearly 30 senses swept over. There were actually more than 30 kings here. There were more than 3,000 venerables. Han Fei glanced at the old snail in the center of this place. Not bad. The fact that you can find the place of origin means that you are indeed capable of leaving the chaotic sea. The old snail complimented. Under the gaze of countless enormous beasts, Han Fei quickly came to the center where the old snail was. However, what no one noticed was that the ripples here were slightly swaying, and a small black stone was slightly swaying. The place where the old snail was located was a weird metal platform, which seemed to be a very high-level mineral vein. Han Fei was alone, tens of thousands of kilometers away, facing the old snail that occupied an area of more than 800 kilometers, which made him look very small. Han Fei cupped his hands. "Senior, now that the place of origin has been found, may I ask what problem you want to solve?" The old snail's figure slowly shrank, and in the end, he shrank into an old man. He looked up at the stars in the sky and then knocked on the metal mine with the wooden staff in his hand. The cultivation of beasts has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that the growth and transformation of the beasts are only related to the amount of time and resources. The resources we need to open the sky may be 10 times or even 100 times what you need. However, the old snail said leisurely, the higher the realm of the beasts, the larger their bodies will be. The further they go, the more they feel that the body of flesh and blood on their back is a heavy bag, and the more they want to get rid of this body of flesh and blood. However, this path is obviously not right. Beasts usually cultivate their bodies. Even demonic plants have extremely powerful bodies. If they want to get rid of their flesh and blood, they will directly deny the path that the beasts have walked before. What do you think is wrong with the cultivation method of the beasts? Han Fei was stunned. "I'm not AF Asterisk King Beast. How do I know how to show you the way?" Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Senior, how do I explain the cultivation path of the beasts?" However, the old snail didn't take it seriously. He said slowly, "You are the second human to enter the place of origin. Do you know why I asked you to come here?" Chapter 2056. The second one? Who's the first one? The snail said, "Tai Yuan." The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. Obviously, Tai Yuan didn't help the old snail solve this problem. Han Fei shook his head. If he had known that the old snail would drag him here to ask for directions, he wouldn't have wasted so much time. Since when did he, a human, have to answer the questions of a giant beast clan? The old snail knocked on the wooden plank and said, "I asked you to come here because the ancestor of the giant beast clan was a human." Huh? Han Fei was dumbfounded. The ancestor of the giant beast clan was a human? Were human beings so awesome? Was it not enough for them to transform into fish demons? Why did they have to cultivate themselves into beasts? The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. Since the ancestor of the giant beast clan was a human, why don't you find someone else to try? The old snail said, "What I'm looking for is a body cultivator. In the entire chaotic azure ocean, other than us almighty beasts, the only decent body cultivators other than Grand Primordial are martial kings. Now there's you. The reason why I didn't ask King Wu to come is that we don't trust him." Han Fei was surprised. "You just trust me?" The old snail said, "You have a clean background. You're the master of the Yin-Yang heaven, the son of Jiang Linxian and Han Guanshu. Why don't I believe you?" Han Fei couldn't help raising his eyebrows. It turned out that the giant beast clan didn't know anything. It could dominate the chaotic ocean. How could it be a noob? Han Fei shrugged. "Even if I have a clean background, do you dare to bring me to the land of origin? The old snail said, anyway, with your tracing ability, you will remember the giant beast clan sooner or later. This emperor inviting you here and you coming uninvited are two different things. If you come uninvited, it means war. Han Fei shrugged. In any case, it seemed that the giant beast clan was facing a very tricky problem. Han Fei said, Senior, you won't ask me to guess your path blindly, will you? The old snail smiled mysteriously. Of course not, but before you unravel the answer, you have to know how the giant beasts cultivate. As he spoke, he saw the old snail slowly take out a jade essence tube from his bosom. He said, this land of origin is the origin of the almighty beasts, and the origin is this giant beast beneath my feet. Pooh, the old snail's jade essence tube hadn't been handed over yet. Han Fei staggered. Isn't there a huge metal mine under your feet? Han Fei's perception swept out again, and he didn't reach the end until he had crossed 8,000 kilometers. The lower half of the metal mine was buried at the bottom of the sea. It clearly looked like a metal vein, okay? However, when he heard the old snail's words, he didn't feel good. If the old snail was the largest beast he had ever seen, then this metal beast was 10 times bigger than the old snail. What kind of realm was this? Han Fei took a breath and asked, where's his face? Old snail, the jagged metal cliff beneath you is his face. In the past, he still had a nose and a face, but as time went on, his body seemed to have become slightly rigid, so he became like this, like a giant mine. Han Fei swallowed. Then let me see how you cultivate first. At this time, the old snail had handed the jade essence tube to Han Fei. The old snail said, immerse your soul in it. Han Fei was not afraid that the old snail would attack him, because the old snail had no killing intent at all. But when Han Fei's soul was immersed in it, with a swoosh, he seemed to have come to another world. His soul seemed to have left his body. In front of him, there was a super creature 7,000 or 8,000 kilometers long that looked like a manta ray swimming in the void. Good boy, Han Fei didn't expect that the beginning would be so shocking. Where is this? Such a huge creature was swimming around. Wasn't its body heavy? Han Fei looked around. Suddenly, the void darkened, and a black hole suddenly appeared. Half of the Superman array's body suddenly twisted. Han Fei looked again, only to find that it turned out to be a black fish 4 or 5 times larger than the Superman array. The huge black hole turned out to be the mouth of the fish, which tore half of the Superman array apart. Shoot, Han Fei didn't feel good. What the hell was this? Wasn't it supposed to be about cultivation? Why did he feel like he was watching a movie? Besides, this movie was too outrageous. A creature with a body of nearly 10,000 kilometers was torn in half. What was wrong with this world? The big black fish bit and swallowed the Superman array, and then turned into a young man, who sat cross-legged and began to cultivate. Then, Han Fei saw that the void was flashing in all directions. When he looked again, he found that he was already in the starry sky. It seemed that billions of stars were emitting starlight and being swallowed by this young man. Han Fei saw that the young man waved his hand, and as many as millions of rare mineral veins appeared in the void. As he opened his mouth, the rare mineral veins that were at least tens of millions of mountains were swallowed by this young man. At this time, the young man shouted, "Today I, Qin Feng, walk the path of behemoths as a human being and become a god. I'm going to pass on the divine path of behemoths to the human world. The behemoths have no barriers in their bodies, and they can absorb heaven and earth. They are engraved here. It's not easy for future generations to become gods or live forever." Han Fei suddenly came back to his senses, but in his mind, a miraculous technique was immediately imprinted. Divine Path of Behemoths, unrated, introduction. The divine path of behemoths is a cultivation art passed down by the gods. If you want to cultivate the divine path of behemoths, you must understand the path of behemoths. Some swallow the sea into their bodies, some cultivate by eating minerals, some swallow the void, and some cultivate by refining their bodies. To cultivate the Tao of behemoths, you must abandon your original path and cultivate the path of behemoths. This art is ranked 13th on the Emperor roll of the 10,000 races in the vast ocean. Path of Behemoths. Uncomprehended deduction. Not deductible effect. You can transform into an enormous beast and cultivate a supreme, true form remark. This art comes with 1398746 paths of behemoths. You don't have to understand the Tao on your own. Han Fei was shocked when he read the information of the divine path of behemoths. Ranked 13th on the Emperor roll of the 10,000 races in the vast ocean, Han Fei looked at the old snail in shock. The old snail was smiling at him and saying, "Are you tempted? You can become a behemoth if you cultivate again." On the same level, the behemoths are much stronger than the other races. Take me for example. The martial emperor, the grand primordial emperor, he Dao Yuan, the war queen, and even the human king can't break my shell. Han Fei's mouth twitched. "Senior, are you doing this on purpose? Are you trying to lure me to cultivate the divine path of behemoths?" The old snail asked, "Are you willing to? You have the body of a human, and it is very likely that you are different from us demonic beasts. I suspect that only the body of a human can reach the peak." Han Fei said, "I'm not willing to." Han Fei thought, "It's impossible for me to give up my current path. The divine path of behemoths is strong, but can it be stronger than the Jade Bridge?" The old snail heaved a sigh. "Just as I expected, the divine path of behemoths is good, but it's not tempting enough. Unless you're willing to give up everything you have right now. Just keep reading." Han Fei sank his mind again to understand the cultivation method of the divine path of behemoths. There were nearly 1,000,000 cultivation methods in it. Han Fei naturally couldn't read them one by one. What he wanted to read was the cultivation method itself. The problem that the old snail and the others encountered was that their bodies were getting bigger and bigger and needed more and more resources. Their bodies were getting more and more overwhelmed, so they wanted to get rid of their shells. To put it bluntly, the old snail and the others wanted to get rid of their huge physical burden. And this was obviously different from the cultivation content in the divine path of behemoths. The divine path of behemoths could be cultivated all the way to the apatheicized realm. Just look at its ranking and you'll know. Han Fei quickly read the entire cultivation method. It was written that when the divine path of behemoths reached the king realm, it would need 10 times or even 100 times more resources than ordinary creatures. If they reached the heaven-opening realm, they would need more resources than the longevity realm. And the quality of the resources couldn't be low, because these resources would be used to cultivate their huge bodies. Han Fei couldn't help but say, "Senior, isn't it clearly stated in the cultivation method that you need resources, a lot of resources? Since you need resources, Senior, you should cooperate with me to destroy the 100 Demons clan and the Human clan at the bottom of the sea. Why did you refuse me?" The old snail said, "Read again. Read carefully." Full of doubts, Han Fei read the entire cultivation method 2 or 3 times again. After reading it for the 4th time, Han Fei saw such a sentence in the author's words. "I cultivated the divine path of behemoths. When I reached the heaven-opening realm, an emperor tried to rob me. Fearless, I attacked the emperor and fought for 3 days and 3 nights until the stars were broken and the big stars fell. The emperor couldn't get it, so he left. The emperor was close at hand. I killed the emperor and achieved the divine path of behemoths. From then on, I dominated the world and became famous in the sea realm." Han Fei thought about it several times. At first, he was quite excited, but after reading it twice, he became confused. "Senior, can you defeat an emperor now?" The old snail looked at Han Fei with a stiff smile and said, "I can't even catch up with you now. Do you think I can defeat an emperor now?" Han Fei said, "Not necessarily. Speed may not be your advantage. Maybe you're very strong." The old snail said, "That's the problem. Qin Feng didn't pass his divine path to us. But now that the giant beast lineage had cultivated to the sea expansion realm, the consumption of resources was negligible. Even their physique can't bear it. Obviously, the gap between their peak combat power and Qin Feng's is too big." Han Fei was speechless. Isn't that because you didn't absorb enough resources? If you poured 1 trillion resources into the origin sea, wouldn't your physique be stronger? The old snail said, "No, it's not a problem of resources. Even with so many resources, I can't go on this path without the help of a peak-level body refining technique. Tai Yuan once left his chaotic demonic body and created me. But I found that his chaotic demon body was no longer enough to bear the growth of the divine path of behemoths." Han Fei was speechless. So, this old snail did have an ulterior motive, asking me to come here to solve the problem? It turned out that he was here to ask for a cultivation method, a body-refining cultivation method. Han Fei was speechless. Can't you just say it directly? Do you want me to come here in person? However, this trip was worth it. At least he got the divine path of behemoths. However, Han Fei suddenly thought of something. Although the chaotic demon body was far inferior to his void body refining technique, it was still ranked more than 10,000 on the sea opening list. However, after being reminded by the old snail, Han Fei suddenly became excited. Others didn't have a powerful body refining technique, but he did. The void body refining technique was ranked 8th among the sea opening realms. Even the chaotic demon body could make the old snail open the sky. What about the void body refining technique? Han Fei swallowed. My main body can't cultivate this Tao, but it doesn't mean my incarnation can't. Han Fei thought to himself, but this cultivation method can't be given away for free. Besides, how did this old snail know that his body refining technique would be stronger than Tai Yuan's?